Good evening, everyone. I call the August 28th, 2023 school board meeting to order. It is 6:02 p.m. We're in conference room C of the Fisher Administration Building at 12121 West North Avenue. Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Dr. Hoyt. Here. Ms. Willis. Here. Dr. Worley. Here. Ms. Heimer-Rolland. Here. Mr. Meyer.
Here.
Dr. Jessup Enger.
Here. I'm going to do just a quick rundown. I know there's a number of community, and before we move into public comment, to clarify something on our agenda. The policy committee is bringing forth several policies to the school board to consider this evening. Some of those, there will be a first reading, which means they'll read them out. The board will give feedback or not, and then they will come back for action on our next or another future board meeting. For some, we are taking action on a few of these items. And one that I know the board got several emails about was specific to, what is the 5120, which takes a look at where students are slotted to go in terms of attendance zones. Specifically, there was a lot of questions around McKinley Elementary students, and are they going to Longfellow? Are some going to Longfellow or West? That was inadvertently on the agenda. We are not taking up any board discussion on that, and that is being pulled from the agenda. The only item for that specific policy, and someone from the policy committee, please correct me if I'm incorrect on this, is that if a student is in a school, let's say Eisenhower, and moves to the Washington neighborhood, and they're staying in Eisenhower, they would be able to then continue on to Whitman and to West. If they wanted to continue on with their cohort of students from Eisenhower and through their north half of schools, they wouldn't have to shift to Longfellow and East. That would be a change in policy to allow that to happen.
And wouldn't have to is key. They could still.
They could.
This is opening a choice.
Yep. So the 2075 task force is taking up school attendance zones. And if and when any changes come to the board is committed and will have open forums for conversations within the community before any action is taken. So that is an item that is not actually on our agenda this evening.
Question as a point of order, may I speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So the 5120, it was agended for action.
Yes.
I'm not sure of the correct way to go to not act on it tonight. One scenario would be whoever reads the motion does not include 5120 in the motion. Therefore, it's never before us for action. An alternative would be read the motion as agended and then move to table. Just trying to comment to assist in your objective to not discuss it tonight.
Yeah. And to clarify, that policy, I believe, still is on as an action item. The board has discussed it in the past. The components of it that change we'll have to do some language adjustments for basically striking any changes to any of that policy except for a specific item that would allow a student to be able to pass through.
Okay, so will
We
you
can offer it as amended, correct?
So the chair will entertain a motion to amend the 5120 as moved, and that's the way to accomplish.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Meyer, we aren't going to take them as a package because so many have not been read yet. So we will be doing each policy.
Okay.
So
all right. I'm just trying to
it's really helpful.
Recognizing your objectives. I'm trying to assist with
helpful.
how we proceed. Okay, thank you.
I think what Mr. Meyer is suggesting is you may want to make a motion before you start your meeting.
Yeah.
To amend 6A to read action to approve or conduct first reading of all policies.
I agree.
If you do it that way, then you have the ability to either act on policy that you believe you're ready to act on or conduct your first reading.
That's a good choice.
I would entertain a motion for such an action from a board member, if you'd like to make that motion now.
I would like to move that when we get to the policy readings, that we change the motion to read that we will act on or do first reading of the motions that are included on the agenda. I so move.
Second.
Any board discussion on this item? Source, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Roland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes. And the agenda is amended to
Thank you. Mr.
read as such. We will now head into public comment on non-agenda items. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issues raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda. Agenda items are not publicly posted in advance. No action will be taken on public comments regarding non-agenda items this evening. Is there any public comments this evening on non-agenda items? Please come on up and introduce yourself and share your address.
Joe McClue, 772 North 116th Street. I thank you. It's been a while since I've been here in the boardroom with you. I'd like to start by congratulating all the new board members and their recent elections. Having said that, though, I am asking this body to undertake some radical election reforms when it comes to the upcoming elections for the school board. It has been far too long since the west side of Tosa has had equal representation or appropriate representation on this body. Mr. Meyer has been the lone voice for the west side of Tosa for a long time, and everyone else tends to come from the east side of Tosa. As such, although we believe that we are being equitable between both east and west sides of the city, the case is that is simply not true. There is an inequality between east and west. As such, I am asking that we look at when elections are held, and we do so in a way that we can assure for fair and equal representation between the two sides of the city. There's a number of ways this can be accomplished, and it's within your power to actually do so. We could use aldermanic districts. We could look at the elementary schools. We can do it a number of different ways, but we really need to look at a way of reforming things so that we have better representation from the west side and things are more equal for our students on both sides of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Jamie, is there any public comment online this evening?
There are no hands raised.
Thank you. Next up is a variety of celebrations and recognitions. The first one is recognition of Century 21 affiliated. Mr. Sam Smith of Century 21 affiliated worked on a gift of backpacks with to provide to students across the school district. I'm not sure how many folks kind of saw the gigantic piles of them that were provided in it was Ms. Summers' office. A big thank you. Mr. Smith isn't available to join us this evening, but thank you to him and so many others who contributed. Students will certainly benefit from this really kind and thoughtful donation. So thank you, Mr. Smith. Next up is recognition of Madison Elementary School. Dr. Means.
We want to recognize and congratulate the Madison Elementary School staff. Often in education, we use the term collective efficacy, and that term is meant to talk about the fact that when a staff sees an issue, an opportunity to turn things around, that they take advantage of that opportunity and they lead. And the Madison Elementary School staff did just that. Their work this past year was recognized at the state level. They received a silver level recognition for their positive behavior intervention and support system. In other words, what that means is that when students were challenged and had situations where it required adult direction or redirection in some cases, that their faculty came together and learned together, grew together, and found ways to support those children. I can attest to the fact that from my first year to the second year, there was a remarkable difference in how the staff handled situations and candidly just the culture of that building. And it started with the staff. I'm so proud of Madison. I'm proud of the fact that they were recognized at the state level. I know that there are members of the faculty at Madison here right now. And mind you, board members and community, this is after a long first day back to work that they came to be recognized, and rightfully so. And so if you are a member of the Madison faculty, if you could please stand, please, at this time. Thank you. Your leadership, your love, and kind of a preview of my speech tomorrow to the staff, your true love and perseverance in the face of challenges is remarkable. And so often we talk about what isn't in Wauwatosa. So often we talk about our challenges. You are a shining example at Madison of what a faculty can do when they put their minds to it and truly wrap their arms around children. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I know I speak for all the parents at Madison. Thank you for your leadership.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would be
May I
remiss
say-
if I didn't.
may I
I would be
say-
remiss if I didn't mention. I was.
I was
Time is
the
everything.
Madison Mustang parent.
Yes.
I want to especially say
Well,
thank you.
Well, I was going to say something else about you, Dr. Worley. Prior to being on the board, Dr. Worley worked with Ryan, our counselor at Madison, to receive, and we did receive a restorative justice grant where there are, I think it's almost, is it $45,000 or I think it was $45,000 of professional learning was pumped into Madison as a result of then Citizen Worley's support. And it was a onerous grant writing process. So I know you were speaking as a mom and as a parent, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that you really led a great process as well. And I see Ryan nodding his head. A lot of the professional learning that was invested at Madison was due to your hard work as well. So thank you, Dr. Worley.
And may we duly recognize that Dr. Worley is a resident of the West District. That was in conversation here, and that is very welcome as the other resident of the West, or resident in the West District. And I will note that my biological children graduated from East, so I'm kind of a carpetbagger moving out. You know, you're the true parent on the board from an elementary school in the West District. So thank you.
For some school boards, 2 recognitions would be enough, but not tonight and not here. We also have recognition of the Washington Elementary PTA. Dr. Means.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Jessup Anger. There is a theme with our recognitions tonight. So Mr. Smith from Century 21 is an example of our community stepping up and supporting our children. Madison, and please, staff members, it's been a long day. If you want to leave, you may at any moment. They're a shining example of what our staff can do when we truly work together to lift up all of our children. But I want to recognize the Washington PTA. And I know Stephanie Livingston from the Washington PTA is here. Thank you, Stephanie. They raised over at Washington. Yes, they deserve a round of applause. They raised over $10,000 on behalf of their school. That deserves a round of applause. $10,000. $10,000. That money will be invested in field trips and opportunities for children. So often we talk about the impact of COVID. This PTA has a vision of making sure that our kiddos get back into our world. They get to see and experience things firsthand. The fact that there's a PTA that felt that they could really lift up their school in a way through fundraising is just remarkable. I want to say thank you to all the leaders. I know Stephanie's a great example of the leadership at the PTA at Washington. And Washington had I would say, a deservedly disappointing year last year. A year ago this time, we had to share with them that we were delayed in building their playground. And that was tough. And in the midst of that disappointing news, they rallied and they chose a positive route to really lift up their school. I don't know if you've driven past Washington, but it looks fantastic. I think it was worth the wait. And I know the children at the Timberwolves are going to really take advantage of that new playground structure. But I just want to say on behalf of a very thankful school district, we are so pleased that your PTA is leading the way and is showing other PTAs what you can do in lifting up a school. Thank you so much.
Big thank you to everybody doing so many good and thoughtful things for the community, for the kids. It's delightful to see. We will now move into our consent agenda. I will pause for everybody who is ready to go home and have some quiet time. Thank you all very much for being here.
We have about 12 hours before we have our kickoff session tomorrow. So as a district, have a great night. Thank you.
Are there any items in the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
It is recommended that the school board approve the consent agenda, and I so move.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Wills. Any board discussion or comments in the consent agenda? Any community comment in the room on the consent agenda? Jamie, anything online on the consent agenda?
No, there are no hands raised.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt. Yes. Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Emerald Rolland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes, and that motion with the consent agenda passes. Next up is strategic goal 4, high quality staff, action to approve employee benefits renewal.
It is recommended that the school board approve option B of the employee benefits renewal, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Olszewski, welcome.
Good evening. I have an updated information sheet for each of you that I'll pass around. I believe you all received or saw copies of the communication that we sent out this past Friday related to questions that have been coming in from staff members regarding the potential change to what we're recommending as Plan B for health insurance. Since even that communication went out, we've had a number of additional inquiries and some contact with our benefits consultants. And so I wanted to provide a few updates. I see many of you are on the second page of the document. If you can flip over to the first side just for a moment. One of the things that we were able to clarify is that our benefits consultant has confirmed with us that they are recommending not under option B in the second paragraph not co-pays plus co-insurance for our benefit plan moving forward. That one of those sufficiently accomplishes the savings that we have recommended. And so it's our preference to go ahead and continue with co-insurance once the tier 1 deductible is met. And so then employees would be responsible for 20% of the cost of the services they receive from a tier 2 provider, and then until they reach the out-of-pocket maximum. So rather than going with both of those, it's simpler just to have one, and it accomplishes the same things that we want. So that is the clarification on the first side. If you flip it over to the second side of the page, I would just provide a little bit of context in terms of why we're having these conversations about our health plan renewal at this time of year. In Wauwatosa, our plan year runs from October 1st to September 30th every year. And so that means that when we're ready to go ahead and renew that health insurance plan, the information that we're waiting on, like our claims information and data, we're trying to get the most up-to-date data so that we can be most accurate with our information. So we don't get that most recent data that we need to base next year's plan on until early August. And then we have about 2 months to go ahead and put together potential changes and then work through our non-renewal process, or excuse me, our open enrollment process at the beginning of September. So that's why these changes take place for us this time of year. In my prior employers, we always had a similar 2-month runway leading up to the change in insurance, but that clock started whenever that renewal was taking place. So whether or not we had a January 1 fiscal year start or a July 1 fiscal year start, 2 months back is when these types of things are taking place. I also would point out that as we came to understand better about how option B could work with our plan, there's really no change to any of the benefits we as employees would receive with the plan until that tier 1 deductible is met. So $1,500 for a single person or $3,000 for family. You can go to any in-network provider, so that would be tier 1 or tier 2 to meet that. And then it's after that point that employees, if they chose to see a tier 2 provider, would start to see that additional co-insurance and that increased out-of-pocket maximum. I was also able to confirm with our benefits consultants today, while I wasn't able to get a percentage, they did confirm that the vast majority of employees in Wauwatosa do not meet their deductible. So most of our employees aren't even getting to that $1,500 or $3,000 minimum with their health plan. There is a bullet just explaining again the co-insurance for tier 2 providers. And explaining the change related to co-insurance as opposed to co-pays and co-insurance. We had a number of questions at the end of last week related to providers through TOSA Pediatrics. And TOSA Pediatrics providers will be under option B, a tier 2 provider, so subject to the co-insurance. And then just a little bit more background about TOSA Pediatrics. Last year, they represented about 1% of our entire claims for our health insurance plan. And so the average cost of a visit to TOSA Pediatrics was about $175. And so if an employee meets their deductible on their health plan and they choose to continue seeing a TOSA Pediatrics provider, the employee would be responsible for $35 of an average appointment cost, and the health plan then would pay for the remaining $140 of the average plan cost, just to give us a sense of what the benefit is and what that out-of-pocket cost would be.
But because they're a tier 2 provider, their deductible for a family would be $4,000 instead of $3,000. So they'd have to meet that $4,000 deductible before co-insurance, correct?
Yes, thank you for the clarification. So, and then once they met the $4,000 deductible, then they would do the $35, $140. Those first $3,000 of expenses can be at tier 1 or tier 2 providers to count for that tier 1 deductible. I appreciate the clarification.
Questions from the board? Mr. Meyer.
I just have a comment that as I have a well-established reputation as being risk averse and conservative on funding and spending. And the reason I am that way is that I believe through life experience that if things are going good, enjoy it because it's might not last. That assumptions, underlying assumptions, things change. Here, claims, behavior changed. And I just say that this experience this year informs us going forward that, our assumptions might not continue to be valid going forward. And in our strategic planning, we need to consider that. I recall I know when Dirt was young in the 1970s and I was in college, there was inflation was quite high. And so you take on your student debt and everything, and you figure, oh yeah, every year after I've graduated and I have a job, the salaries are going to keep increasing to match inflation. And I graduated and inflation slowed down. So salary increases slowed down. And I was counting on that in my strategic plan to, that somehow, inflation is good for debtors with fixed interest rates. So I learned from that, don't count on current conditions to continue. And so I just point that out here, and then here we are. Something isn't going as well as it used to for the past few years, and that's probably normal in life, that things don't continue, good or bad. And so be prepared. So thank you.
Ms. Willis.
So how will this affect folks who already had something planned under the old insurance coverage? I mean, is that something that you just kind of naturally assume that maybe coverage could change during any open enrollment period?
Can you give me an example of?
So like if someone had a surgery scheduled for December and now this is going to change. Well, I mean, it will change, right? Because the old insurance won't cover that.
So we're maintaining the same health insurance provider, United Healthcare is the recommendation. So regardless of whether or not there was a change, like what we're proposing, our new plan year would start over October 1st. And so there would be a new deductible to meet. And so if depending on the cost of the surgery, if it's at a tier 2 provider and it would cost more than $3,000, you could potentially have expenses that were that were beyond that deductible. It is a little bit atypical for surgeries unless there's a reason of medical necessity. For surgeries that are planned out, it's a little bit unusual to have one at the early part of a plan year. Oftentimes, unless there's a medical necessity, they typically get delayed a little bit until that deductible has been met. Okay.
And then I had a question about, you kind of answered it on this paper, but maybe just to bring it to the public's attention, that you did explore starting January 1st rather than October 1st, but it wasn't feasible.
Yes. So actually last year at this time, Keith and I and Dr. Means were working with our benefits consultants because there's some preference for either a January 1 or a July 1 plan year. January 1 being the closest option to our October 1 current plan year. And based on our high deductible health plan, there was really no way to go ahead and bridge that, even just those couple of months without having employees incur some extra plan costs during that transition. So we would be very interested in trying to figure out how that could happen, but we didn't want to pass on those extra costs to employees.
Sure. Well, and again, I just want to thank you and your team for the attention that you took to create these options, because it's not easy. As Mr. Meyer mentioned, good things sometimes come to an end and it's hard with change, but I appreciate that your team has been so thoughtful and considerate of how this is going to affect the employees who are covered by this. So thank you.
So I've talked to a lot of our staff about this in the last 2 weeks. I've talked to a lot of staff in the district office and staff at our schools. And so my understanding is that our expenses were an outlier this year because of some contributing factors. The thing I'm having a hard time with, honestly, is increasing these costs at a time where we sort of celebrated giving all of our staff raises. And so I understand that that's unfortunate timing. I think it's just kind of how it ended up this year. But when I think about our staff, our support staff, who are still not making comparable salaries to our districts, you know, our close districts. And I think about if they have a tier 2 provider and we're passing $1,000 extra cost to them, that's hard for me to come to a vote yes for this plan. I also think about our families who have high medical costs. One of my daughters has had some issues this year and our medical costs have been sky high. And so we could at least plan because we knew our out-of-pocket max and we knew what our deductible was. But we knew that since January. So, or if somebody's expecting a baby soon. I just think that it's hard for me to pass this expense onto our staff at a time where we said, we know we've been giving you really great benefits and these are still really great options. Option B is a really great option. But I think when we have staff who have stayed with us to have above excellent health insurance, and we've just now kind of caught up the salary side of things. I appreciate all the work and I appreciate all the questions that everybody answered for me, but I can't vote yes for option B because of the cost that it passed down to our staff.
Sorry, I don't know what the proper way to, when I'm supposed to say this, but I am going to recuse myself from this vote because of conflict of interest.
I would just modify that statement. There is no evident conflict of interest, but there is the potential or appearance of a conflict of interest because you work at a health provider.
Yes.
But Dr. Hoig has done nothing where there's a conflict of interest. I just want to clarify.
Mr. Meyer.
A conflict of interest can arise without any improper activity. It just happens to be how life lined up your ducks. So there's no inference or suggestion to me that if someone says, oh, I can't vote on this because I have a conflict of interest. Well, you know, you could be putting a sewer pipe in front of my house. And if I was an alder, I might not want to vote on it. It's not my fault I lived there. Well, it's my fault I lived there. But you know, so I'm just trying to say, you know, I wouldn't take anything negative from a recusal for conflict of interest. You still might want to do it, but I'm just saying that there's, as Dr. Means is saying, there's no inference or suggestion to me that if somebody can't vote, that it's a good idea. I mean, it's an act of ethical, good conscience to say that. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for all your work on this. I know it must be one of the difficult parts of your job. So I do appreciate that. I want to follow up a little bit on what Ms. Heimer-Roland was pointing out. I too have really struggled with the idea of the hard work to move ahead. The tension that's held, perhaps maybe this might be a little different tension with making sure that our students have the resources that they need, which I think is kind of like the strain here is what we need good staff. We need to spend well on them. We also need to make sure we're planning for our district for the future. Is there anything between, because we have a decent fund balance for this. I know it's not great to take half of it and use it in a single year. Is there anything between, not to make more work, but is there any, and I know we're running out of time, is there anything between A and B, like an 8.5, where we could invest a little bit more of our district resources and share a little bit more of the costs?
Yeah. So our healthcare fund balance is a little different than our Fund 10 fund balance. With a Fund 10 fund balance, we're consistently investing in it. Our healthcare fund balance is fairly stagnant. And if we continue, as Mr. Meyer has alluded to, if we continue to have difficult experience with our healthcare plan, that number dwindles. And then eventually, if it gets down to zero, we do then have to go to Fund 10 And that's then taking money away from children in classrooms. So what I would say is that there's a greater responsibility of us keeping a healthier healthcare fund balance than even the Fund 10 fund balance. Now, we should be very prudent with both of them, but I would say there's even, it's more delicate with the healthcare fund balance.
So can I just follow up? I guess to add to what I was saying, part of what I hear is I haven't had enough months to plan for this. So is there a stepwise approach to not increase it as much this year, but also make clear that next year we continue this path? I'm just trying to think sort of like in a creative, and you may already have thought of all these things and decided it's not going to be effective, but I want to throw that out there so we're really thinking through possibilities.
Like I said, we spoke with our benefits consultants as recently as about 2:00 this afternoon. And this really is our recommendation coming forward. This is the best measured option that we feel comfortable with.
Mr. Morris, then Mr. Meyer.
Yes, I said, I don't have an issue with the option B. And I think one of the things that for myself, who is not an employee or an educator or relying on this health plan, I think it's important to note that to Mr. Meyer's points that he's made very clear both today and in the past about the conservative nature, I think option B gives us a very strong middle ground to that conservative nature. Because what I look at, and to your point as well, because I agree with you, it's a tough pill to swallow. We did just offer it and give these increases, but what if we hadn't had those increases? We'd still be running into this. And I think also when we're looking at the future, people where we're at, no matter what industry we're in, our healthcare is our healthcare. It's happening across every industry across our country. What we have here now, I think, is a very good depiction of what we're going to be looking at in the future. So when we look at this again next year or 2 years later, that 5.7 million in the fund balance, I said, if we were to chip away and say, go back to option A, because at first my thoughts were there, could we do it? I had a part of me that said, yes, we can. However, to Mr. Meyer's point, we do that now. We have the same exact thing next year? And it's just a different mix of those employees. It's not the same ones. We have that severity of claims. I work in the insurance world, so this is speaking my language. And these things typically don't change. We're going to see this, and to Mike's point, the assumption we made from last year to this year, looking at that, we budgeted for a 2% increase. What if we look at that and say, hey, next year they budget for a 5% increase, but it's really going to end up being another 8 or 9 million next year at each one going forward. I think we have to, the timing it's really unfortunate, but I think it's one where we actually have to either do something or they suffer in the long run when we think about the coming years and each year after by not doing anything. So I think the choice is here. It's not the best one, I think, compared to doing my own research these last couple of weeks, looking at data from the McIver Institute and everything else I found between DPI and the state when it comes to healthcare costs and the participation rates. We do have high participation rate in our district, but across the majority of the rest of the state, I said, we have it really good. Really, really good. I actually had to go back and look at my insurance that I might need to be a part-time teacher and slide in here as well. But with all that being said, I think option B is the best one. Option C would make it extremely difficult because I was very pushing that much on there to go from the 820,000 benefit deficit to, the going down to only 676,000 would be that remainder. It sounds like it's a good one, but it's still not that much. It is drastically one side versus the other between A and C. And I think B for me is that solid middle ground that gives still a great benefit for teachers that are here, teachers that want to come in, as well as our tenured teachers that, I really do feel for those as well that say, hey, I don't have all these healthcare costs. My kids, I'm in a very good space that my kids, for those teachers who have healthy families that don't have to use it as much. But I said, but it's a tough one across the board. So I agree with you, Liz, but I think it is, for me, at least, it's prudent that we have to make an option. We have to make a choice at some point. I think today we kind of have to do that.
Sure.
The point of insurance, of course, is that most people don't need it. But a few people will suffer losses and the insurance spreads the risk around. So the argument that this change, it doesn't affect, so many people already don't reach their deductible or copay. Well, that's not a good argument to me because the point is to help the few who who need it, and it's paid for by the many. Now, if most people receive the benefits, then it's not really insurance, right? I mean, it's kind of like we pay in, then we take out. Now, also, please remember that we are the insurance companies, right? We are self-insured. And insurance companies have to maintain reserves because losses are not perfectly predictable. And so to Dr. Worley's question, yes, we could structure this so that we consume some of our reserves this year and kind of go halfway. But then we've agreed to assume more risk as an entity, which is to Dr. Means' point. If the downside risk hits, we use up all of our reserve funds. Now we have to go to the general fund. So it depends on the board's appetite for risk. We hit this all over the place. The question of, should we short-term borrow? Well, it looks really easy when interest rates are pretty much down to zero. Well, now they're getting up to pretty high. And if we'd have been silly, by my opinion, years ago and started to short-term borrow because money was cheap, and now boom, here we are, we get hit with it. You just don't know, right? And this is true with so many things we do financially. So so the key is we are the insurance company. And if we run out of money to pay the claims, and the question is, how much risk do you want to accept that we will have enough money or not have enough money?
I follow. So yes, but the individuals, some of them, the likely impact on them is much bigger than the entity of the Wauwatosa School District. So if there were a proposal where we were shouldering 50% and they were shouldering 50%, I would be more supportive. At least, I mean, it's still not great, but at least it feels like we're really partnering with our staff.
Ms. Olszewski, can you remind me, I'm pretty sure I know this answer, but I want to be 100% clear, what the monthly premiums are for our insurance for employees?
0.
I think that's I think it's a really important point.
May I add a caveat?
Yes.
The caveat is that our school year employees, if they elect for a family insurance plan, there is an additional cost to them to opt into that family insurance plan. That's a really standard, very typical plan design for public school districts around the state, but for sure in our area. And that's something that Keith and I have agreed on, that we'll continue to look to see if we can provide a smaller additional contribution in that case going forward. This was not the year to do it, but for all teachers, which is the majority of our staff members, it is a 0 monthly copay for family and single coverage.
I just add one more thing. So some of the questions I asked, I think, now that we have more time to think about, and work on things like offering an HSA for some of our employees, or when we're able to have a health clinic for our staff, that's going to be a huge cost saving for the district and for staff members. So as I think about it, and I don't disagree with taking that much money out of our fund balance at this time, I just think that if this doesn't pass and the insurance stays the same as it is this year, we do have some opportunities next year. So when we're taking this vote again next August, that hopefully the health clinic will be ready or running, and maybe we can figure out a way to get an HSA system working for our staff who that would help. So I have thought about this outside of just sort of the numbers and who would affect. Again, it's mainly the timing for me and making sure that all of our staff know that we really appreciate them, and we're not going to kind of give them a raise and then say, well, now you have this extra potential $1,000 or $2,000 expenses every year.
For clarity purposes, our health plan is a high deductible health plan, and so their employees may contribute to a health savings account. The district does not make any contributions to the health savings account.
And My last comment would be, we have had an astronomical run of really good numbers for our increases. And so to Mr. Meyer's point, it has been, I think, surprising every year that we haven't seen something creep up where we had to do an effect. So I very much understand the perspective of being surprised by this. I suspect everyone was surprised. We'll see where this goes in the future. Not desirable, but I understand the position that we're in. I'd like to shift, if there are no more board questions, to any community comment in the room and then online on this topic. Any community comment in the room? Seeing none. Jamie, any community comment online?
Yes, we do have a hand raised. Lauren Rosnowski Hayden, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Hi, this is Lauren Rosnowski Hayden, and I live at 2347 Lefevre Ave. My husband and I are teachers in the district. We are also district residents, and our daughters attend Roosevelt. We are high stakeholders in this district. I'm even an alum myself. We are, as TOSA residents, shocked to find out that 0 of our healthcare providers fall under Tier 1. And we see all of our providers locally. We are especially disappointed regarding TOSA Pediatrics, which is a long time great opportunity for families in this community that they are not considered Tier 1. I think the message that sends is that they are not quality, which we know is not true because this district invited the doctors at that practice to be on the advisory health panel recently. Many of the doctors are children to attend TOSA schools, and we will continue to go there at a higher cost because we believe in that practice so much. Similarly, last year, our dentist, TOSA Dental, dropped Delta, and Delta Dental is the insurance we have here in the district. They said that Delta had become increasingly challenging to work with, and they could no longer support it because it was trying to lower the quality of care. And so we tried a few other dentists, and we just could not find the quality that we had there. So we are, again, paying additional. And now we feel like we are paying for boutique healthcare because we are unable to have full coverage at the practices that are in the city we live and work in that we would like to go to. I spoke with United, and they told me that there are 2 ways this is typically done. One is the way that our district is planning on going, which is to encourage people to go to specific practices like Freighter, Aurora, and Children's, and the other is to go to doctors that are rated as highly effective. Every doctor at TOSA Pediatrics is rated as highly effective, but because the practice is not tied to Freighter or Aurora, they are not considered Tier 1 under the direction we are going. So I strongly encourage us to rethink this and to go in the other direction so that we can be encouraging employees to see highly effective rated doctors rather than belonging to specific medical groups. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more hands raised.
Any final questions or comments from the board? Yes, Mr. Meyer.
I'll make an observation that the notion of highly effective, and experts would have to speak more definitively to this, but if a doctor is in a practice that takes patients with diseases or afflictions that are chronic, sometimes that makes the doctor appear to be less effective because there's repeat visits. And that is a challenge in healthcare economics to provide a definition of effective practice of medicine for those who are willing to take on the very difficult cases.
Seeing no other comments or questions on the board, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt, recused. Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
No.
Ms. Heimer Roland,
No.
Mr. Meyer,
No.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes. There's no clear winner on that one. In all my time, this is the first time we've ever been tied.
The motion fails. Is that correct?
Motion fails.
May I say that I'm for cost sharing, but not option B?
So board, we find ourselves in a position.
So mine's a no, because that's all it was.
So what that means is that we'll have to go to our fund balance to utilize to close the gap financially, which will bring it down even lower than the $800,000 that we presented. That is by virtue of your tie vote, that's what it means.
Any other board discussion on this? Mr. Meyer?
We are, I don't want to be preachy, but we're at hand with having to address our financial strategy and the big picture when this stuff happens like this. So I don't know how we address it, but we all know it. I'm just adding a voice here that this decision point seems to be coming up on us quicker than I would have thought.
I would like to entertain another motion on this item.
Well, I guess you can. You're at, and maybe we should have just explained it beforehand. If the motion fails, because the gap right now financially is how much again, Keith and Sarah?
$2.3 million.
So what that would mean is if the motion fails, instead of using $800,000, we would use 2.3 of. So we'll be using 2.3 million of our $5.7 million fund balance in healthcare costs or healthcare savings. That's the reality.
I would like to pause and understand for myself and for the board, what risk is being taken on right now by this decision?
So the risk is if in the next plan year, if there's a catastrophic case, and it can mean a number of different things. We have lives that we insure that may have a premature baby. There may be highly significant medical costs. If you couple that with increasing costs of insurance, we could see an increase of double digits next year this time. And so then we'll have to decide if we're going to take more money away from Fund 10 to cover the cost of the insurance next year. I think what Mr. Brightman and Ms. Zelazowski has been trying to do, because all the different strategies that have been shared in terms of health savings accounts and trying to stay away from higher deductibles, those are all strategies that we know we will have to deploy at a later date because, as it's been shared earlier, the ebb and flows of insurance costs is really unpredictable. But let me also state this clearly. We care for our employees as well, and we want to make sure that things are as beneficial for them as possible as well. And it's difficult for us to present a more conservative recommendation to the board. That's hard for us to do. But when we consider, I think it's been mentioned earlier by Mr. Meyer, as a self-insured insurance plan, we just take on greater risk as the school district. That's a long explanation of what's at risk if we have to invest more than $800,000 of our fund balance of healthcare costs or healthcare savings, excuse me.
I have a couple follow-up questions. What is the recommended level of balance that we should have per our consultants who are experts in the field?
Well, that's different than a Fund 10 number. So you've heard us give you the example of what auditors tell you what dollar amount and what percentage you should have in your Fund
Yep.
10 balance.
This is just for the insurance.
For healthcare fund balance, that's a very different concept because we, as it's been stated, we are the insurance company. We take on greater responsibility as the school district. So we don't know if there's going to be a and that's the term that they use in insurance. We don't know what the catastrophic cases will be from year to year. So it's impossible for us to say this is the level in which we should be in terms of our healthcare fund balance amount. Candidly, we want it to be as healthy as possible because we don't know what those catastrophic cases are going to be from year to year.
And to add to that, I said, I think one of the things that I think even maybe the general public may not get on the insurance side, when we talk about those catastrophic cases, it's not, we've had hundreds of people that have all these cases. It could be 5 people. It could be a family of 4 that got in a car accident that changes all this. And we're right back here with major. When you see the med flight leave from Children's, that helicopter lands and your insurance is paying for that. What's going on when you have the ambulance come or you have multiple jurisdictions? So all those things add to insurance is covering that. And if you got good insurance, it's covering all those things. So it drives those costs up. And I think when we get to this spot where we're looking at 2.3 million of that 5.7, for me, the risk on that side coming from the insurance world looks at, we are self-insured. We are the insurance company. Our loss ratio is out of whack from what we're looking at here. And so it may not be an outlier. We may see the claim frequency shrink next year, hopefully, but the severity could be 3 times as much because people that, I would love to say that healthcare is going to be great in America and people are going to get better year to year and that it's working and the medicine works, but we know reality. Depending on what you have, whether it's something small or something large, it can just continue to grow. Somebody in our district could have that for the next 5 years. They're still here and we want to maintain because they could be great employees, all these things. But I think we have to look at the bigger picture and then how that affects the further conversation we have of taking money from elsewhere.
So I would say just that's sort of implicit in us being our own insurance. We could have, if we talk about a family of 5 getting in a car accident, we could have 2 families of 5 and then we're using all of it in our cash fund balance. Anyways, obviously that's an extreme example, but that's sort of the risk we take at being our own insurer. So while I understand we want as much money in as a buffer as we can have in that, extra health fund balance.
Liz, embedded in your comments, what I'm hearing is your recommendation to some degree of examining not being our own insurer.
Well, I wouldn't say, I don't know.
Because
No, I'm not saying that.
The question
I'm not saying
this
that.
vote raises for me,
Sure.
I believe the board then should call, if we're going to vote no on this, for exploration of having not being self-insured. If we're not going to have a healthy fund balance, I think we then need to look at other options. That I don't know what, if anything, I don't know what that will do, but
I wonder, you know what that would do? Excuse me.
So yeah, that would be the fully insured model where you're out and purchasing insurance through a provider. They're going to look at our actual costs and they're going to base their rates on that. So that won't save any dollars. And they're going to build in a profit margin for themselves. And so we'd have both of those factors working against us. And we wouldn't have as much ability to change plan design and control plan design by going to a third party. There'd be a lot more steers than we're suggesting right now.
Well said.
So inevitably it would be more of a burden on.
Be more restrictive, correct? And more costly.
To add to that, I said, if you think about it, insurance companies are here to make money. And so we talk about profit margin, whether it's good economy or bad economy, they're still there to make money. And so no matter what that looks like, I compare, we used to have United Healthcare with my employer and moved over to Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. Really good coverage. A lot of my doctors, somewhat similar to what these teachers saying, my chiropractor, who did not change offices, is no longer in that list. And so it said, I just had to make different decisions. That's unfortunate. Would I like to go a whole lot more? Yes. Would my kids like to go? Yeah, but I can't add that. That's a large cost that you start adding up. You just start to make different decisions. And I think, again, going to Dr. Justin Banger's point there of, if it does raise that question of going that route, I think that puts our district and our teachers in a much worse position than even option C when you go down that rabbit hole.
Smart.
I'm trying to figure out on the fly here how to address what is evidently the desire of the board is to keep discussing this. And because we called the results of the roll, so it's the tie is a decision. There's a thing called a motion to reconsider, and it has rules to it, and it must be made by the and then probably seconded, I'm not sure, by the people who voted to defeat the prior motion. Well, the prior motion wasn't defeated, it was tied. So, but just to put us on good footing. Could have been me. It's been me before. I know. So if we really want to keep talking about this, and maybe we really might want to revote, I would, if the chair entertained it, I would be willing to make a motion to reconsider because I was a no vote. And then if there's a second, typically it says a motion to reconsider, you would take up the matter at the next meeting. But the motion wasn't really voted down, it just was tied. So, we could, if the board really wants to reconsider, I would be willing to offer a motion to reconsider, and then it could be seconded, and then we could call the roll and check with the lawyers tomorrow.
Also, it says it has to be reconsidered in the same meeting, so that motion would have to be today.
Yeah, it would have to be right now before we take up another
Exactly.
action, right? So I'm just trying
I
to
would certainly
assist the
entertain
chair. Would you, so I would make I thereby make a motion to reconsider the prior vote.
Second.
And we might need a second from.
No, it
somebody
says
who would-
anybody can.
Anybody can second. Okay, that's good. I'm glad. Okay, sure. So I moved, there's a second.
Now you have to call the roll.
We call the roll on whether to reconsider.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt,
Abstain.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Roland,
No.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes. So we're in a motion to reconsider. Are there any amendments that anyone would like to place on the motion?
Ms. Zelazowski has maybe another alternative for you to consider.
So in speaking with our benefits consultants today, while option B is what we brought forward as a recommendation, we would have the option, if you look on the front page of the handout I shared this evening, under option B, where it says that the deductible would be increased for tier 2 services to $2,000, $4,000, we could keep the tier 2 deductible at $1,500, $3,000, which is the same as the tier 1 deductible. And we would still need to leave the increased out-of-pocket maximum and the coinsurance. So what would happen if we were to go ahead and maintain the $1,500, $3,000 deductible for tier 2 providers is that same deal with your out-of-pocket deductible expenses. Once then an employee's plan met the deductible, whether it was in tier 1 or tier 2, the employee would then be responsible for coinsurance up to the out-of-pocket maximum. But it starts that coinsurance a little bit sooner, so there's less upfront risk for employees in that option. What I just described saves 1% less. That's approximately the equivalent of about $155,000. So under option B, rather than having a continuing deficit of $820,000 after the changes, we'd be looking at continuing to have a deficit of $975,000. It's about 1% different than what we've proposed and recommended.
So in essence, we're using a little bit more of the fund balance.
Yeah.
But it creates it evens things out a little bit more. And it's still, we believe it's is not as conservative as option B, but we would call it B light.
A plus.
Yes.
Board questions and comments on that?
So for an individual then that potentially saves them about $500 if they're of the sort that would get to that deductible, and family 1,000, is that too simplified?
That's probably a little bit too simplified because there's still the out-of-pocket maximum.
Okay.
But it slows down how quickly they could get to those levels. So they have a little bit more
So
time
we'd
for
be
planning.
expanding the number of employees who probably would feel a lot less impact.
I think it actually if I may, I think it actually addresses your concerns, Liz, of slowing down the out-of-pocket costs for employees, regardless of the pathway. Because I think as I'm listening to everything, your concern is that we're passing on the cost savings to the employees to bridge this increase. Well, I think with this option that we're putting on the table right now, it indicates that we're going to use a little bit more of our fund balance as a district. And we're slowing down that process of out-of-pocket costs for the employee. It feels there's a little bit more risk on the table for the district, but it is slowing things down a little bit more and protecting, buffering, if you will, the employee from costs.
So can I just give, can I give an example? So if we have a family who uses a tier 2 provider, they will meet their deductible at 3,000 instead of 4,000. So then when they get to 3,000, then they start co-insurance. So instead of paying full price for a visit from the 3,000 to 4,000, they'll be paying 20% from 3,000 to 4,000.
You got it.
Which potentially is a big cost savings.
Absolutely.
Yes.
An appointment at $35 instead of $175. You're gonna get to that.
That's a big
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing that we didn't touch base on between meetings, but I believe you're all aware of it, in consultation as well, we did add a cash in lieu of insurance benefit. So we're continuing to try to build out options for employees based on their family circumstances. Now that won't be possible. Ms. Jevanyani Walter spoke earlier. Both of her breadwinners in the family are TOSA employees, so they wouldn't have an option for the cash in lieu because they would both be on our health plan. But that will create options for other employees depending on their circumstances.
Different, Lauren.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Different Lauren. Sorry, Lauren Rosnowski Hayden.
Any board questions or comments on this item?
Is there a motion on the table to do what is recommended?
There's not as of yet.
Okay,
Can I make a motion?
Yes, you may.
It is recommended that the school board approve option B of the employee benefits renewal with the following amendments. On the second paragraph, an increased deductible of 1,500 and 3,000. And then the fourth paragraph, that the remaining healthcare deficit would be 975,000.
Yep.
And I so move.
Approximately.
Approximately 975,000. And I so move.
May I have a second on that item?
Second.
Thank you. Any other board discussion on that amended motion? Please call roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt, recused. Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Roland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
yes,
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes. Thank you all for working through that. Mr. Meyer and Dr. Worley, thank you for your guidance.
Very helpful. Thank you for kind of.
May I want to thank the board members because you've been asking us questions for the last 2 weeks. And I want to lift that up because sometimes the public doesn't see you asking those questions and constantly engaging us. So I want to thank you. I want to thank our staff because there have been constant communication with our staff. I want to thank our Waltos Education Association representatives. I know they met with Ms. Zelizoski to give feedback on this process, and I think they will be pleased with this result. And I want to thank Sarah and Keith finally. the fact that they were able to make the pivot here this evening, the fact that they had done their due diligence and their homework so we could get to this place. Often we throw around the topic governance and what good governance looks like. I just want to say you should all be very proud of yourselves. And when I say you all, I mean staff, the community, and obviously the board. This was governance at its best. Good job. Well done.
Thank you. Clearly, we've got some examination to do to make sure that this is a healthy, strong plan in place. So thank you in advance for your work.
Well, hopefully we'll have a director of finance that can help with that examination.
What a delightful
Radio.
Speaking of which, our next item is action to approve the administrative contract for the director of finance. This one is this time around.
It is recommended that the school board approve the 2023-24 administrative contract of Jessica Hinker as Director of Finance effective September 11, 2023 for 229 days per year at an annual salary of $104,000 prorated based on a start date. And I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Wills.
Yep, I'm happy to introduce Jess. She comes to us from a larger area school district with just over 10 years experience there. And what's unique about that experience is both within school buildings as well as in district office, where she has both perspectives on how to be extra supportive and service friendly out to our schools. Her colleagues talk about how not just smart she is and how good she is with school finance and business office practices. But then she goes out of her way to really help people and just is a good person to work with. So we're looking forward to having her on our team. She starts September 11th, provided she's approved, and we're looking very forward to, again, having her part of our team.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to this opportunity with working with the administration and moving the district finances forward.
Mr. Meyer.
I say in respectful jest that obviously this job is not going to have any pressure. So thank you for joining us.
Any other board questions or comments on this item? Any community comment on this item? Jamie, anything online?
No, there are no hands raised.
Standing. Please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Roland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessica Finger.
Yes. Welcome and congratulations. Next on our agenda is the report from our Finance and Resource Committee.
Our committee met last Friday and had some updates on the summer projects that took place. There's a new playground at Washington. The Eisenhower playground is expected to be completed by the end of September. There were security and phone updates, district-wide and additional safety updates done as well. There was some brickwork done at Roosevelt, electric work and generator updates at East, classroom and office movement and rearrangement at Eisenhower, new security and staff offices at Whitman, updated security entrance at Longfellow, lockable cell phone caddies installed in secondary schools, and all annual summer cleaning and maintenance was completed. I wanted to say thank you to Kevin and Mark with facilities. Mr. Brightman sang your praises during the committee meeting and said a lot of these projects weren't even started at the beginning of summer. So it was a huge feat for that whole team to get all of those things. And that's just kind of like the big items that got done this summer. So want to give a round of applause to everybody who made that happen. So thank you. They also had their first division barbecue. So that's nice too. We were able to celebrate them. The board will be receiving a 2024 summer project recommendations in October, November. And the board, next item, board and community will receive full financial accounting in September and a budget hearing is scheduled for October 9th. If you look on board docs for the financial report that'll be attached to tonight's meeting, you'll be able to see the June financial report. Included starting this month is going to be a full voucher listing. So those are all the payments that the district has made that month, listed alphabetically. And that was added to just increase transparency to the community with where our funds are going. There was an on-site financial audit completed the week of August 14th, and the auditor feedback was that there were no material findings, and we expect a clean audit opinion sometime in December or early January. We just hired the director, approved the hiring of the director of finance. We will be interviewing the week of September 4th, I believe, for the director of facilities. So those two additions will be great for the team in the office that have been working, I'm sure, many overtime hours to get everything needed up for the beginning of school. And referendum projects were all completed. I'm right about that. Maybe there was one more, but all the projects from the referendum, Keith.
Correct. So we completed really the Washington Playground this summer and the East Generator were the two big lift projects that we completed this summer. As part of our recommendation coming out in October, November, we'll bring back the final residual spend down of the referendum funds and recommendation of how to spend those dollars, likely on safety security items, that kind of thing within the system, but very much parallel with what we've already spent those dollars on. But we're nearing the end. The goal is to have it completed by the end of this year.
And then the September 13th Finance Committee meeting, we'll be discussing how much was left in some potential projects that could be funded with that those leftover funds.
Correct. Yep.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you, Ms. Morales and Mr. Breton. We will move on to our next action item in operations. Action to approve a 5-year lease for office space at 11803 West North Avenue for the Recreation Department.
It is recommended that the school board approve the 5-year lease for office space at 11803 West North Avenue for the Recreation Department, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Worley. Mr. Breton.
Yeah, you can introduce it. We're requesting a lease for a property for a recreation department. It will suit their needs from an office standpoint. It's meant to give them the space they need for storage as well as workspace, collaboration space, things that they just don't have now in their current location. Their current location, we would like to repurpose, we mentioned earlier, is a possible on-site clinic for employees. That might be in partnership with the city also, which would be nice, and have a east side that the city would manage and west side that we would manage that existing space. Little history on this property. We originally looked at this for an alternative education site, and we had to rule that out due to some zoning requirements with fire suppression. It had nothing to do with ADA access at that point. But we did have, as part of that, a full ADA assessment done by Plunkett Research Architects, who's our go-to architectural firm. And it did identify some things that would need to be updated if you're switching from an office zoning or utilization to an education type of structure. Our feedback from PRA, Plunkett Research, is if we're going from office to office, which is currently what would happen within that space, then technically there are no requirements to update anything within that space for ADA compliance. But with that said, we do have intent to update the space to meet the needs of our employees and community within that space. So with that, we've negotiated favorable lease terms with the property owner. We started out at $17 a square foot. We've gotten down to 14 as part of the lease rate there. As we look for additional properties for alternative at high school and middle school, the common area maintenance fees can sometimes be just as much as the rental fees for a lot of those properties, especially if we're talking eight type properties. And the common area assessment fees for this property are also relatively low. So we're excited for the opportunity for our rec department to occupy this space. We think the presence in the community with the signage and just being on North Avenue, just 2 blocks down from us, will give them just a little bit more kind of bang for their office buck within that. So we're recommending the board approve the lease.
Mr. Brayman, can you speak to the negotiations that we conducted over the weekend with property owner regarding ADA costs that we may incur.
Yes, so with that, you'll see, and I believe it's uploaded to board docs, but you have an addendum to the lease. And any updates that we determine need to happen from an ADA standpoint would be 50-50 cost share between the property owner and the district, which we think is fair and reasonable, given that we would be occupying the space and getting the benefit out of that. Her paying 50% of that would give her a long-term benefit out of that for the improvements also. When we did the alt ed analysis, we did look at the ADA bathroom configurations. There are some doorways that would need to be widened, 2 of them within the space. That's pretty minor to widen those doorways. The bathrooms is a little bit more major, but given the building is made of spancrete, which is concrete kind of structural, there's nothing underneath that. So it's relatively simple to move bathrooms around and put new ones in compared to other types of structures.
I'm just very proud that Ms. Hummer-Rowland and Dr. Worley knows this. We found out on noon on August 25th that we should just be cautious of the costs because per the contract language, we were responsible 100% for those costs. We took the feedback from the community member who was at our committee meeting. We immediately went to the property owner and said, is there a way that we can make this more reasonable for our community? That person got to a point where we were able to negotiate a 50-50 split. I think from a finance and resource committee perspective, that was a concern that was raised. They shared with us and gave us the direction of try to bring that cost down. And we're very pleased that we're able to bring that to you this evening.
Yeah, and the magnitude of those improvements, she had an analysis done and architectural drawings done up earlier this summer with the alt ed in play with there. It was about a $40,000 upgrade for the ADA bathrooms at that time. So she actually had quotes and drawings and things. So again, magnitude, we know what that is. Opening up the other spaces doesn't seem to be a big burden either for us.
We also understand that a community group by the name of Independence First has done their own analysis and assessment of the property. We have received that assessment. We're very thankful to Independence First for providing that to us. We've immediately sent that over to our architect this afternoon. The architect agreed with many of the recommendations, but also, and I shared that information with the board, has went on to say, but does not believe that will be a substantial cost to the district. So when you consider the fact that the architect has agreed with that analysis or assessment, but doesn't think it's going to be substantial, and that we know that whatever the cost is a 50-50 split, we think we're doing our due diligence from a financial standpoint. The last point that I would just share with you is that whatever costs are incurred, those dollars will come out of our Fund 80 account, which is our community/recreation fund, not Fund 10, which is that impacts where we purchase classroom materials, how we hire teachers. So that's also another, I believe, buffer for the district from a cost saving standpoint. In many ways, this is a very prudent and fiscally wise presentation we're sharing with you. I'm going to toss it back to Mr. Brightman and just have him share with you that he's been, for the last 6 months, he's been on the commercial market, real estate market in Wauwatosa. And so the dollar amount that we're paying square footage in this building is considerably lower than most other places in the area.
Right. And a lot of what we're looking at too, and Mr. Pinion has been doing some of those sites with me also, even though they're deemed more modern or accessible, they're still on second or third floors and they're more difficult to get to. So this one being right on a first floor location, right inside the front door, just seems to make a lot of sense for us from that standpoint also.
More questions?
How long do you anticipate us or the recreation department staying in that building?
I'll ask Matthew. I believe they're looking for a permanent home. And so I think this would be a long-term arrangement with this. It's a 5-year lease to an initial, but I can see that going another 5 years.
My other point is just a comment to say thank you for continuing to negotiate this to get it to a really great space for the district.
Any other board questions or comments?
When do you anticipate that the recreation department can take occupancy of that building?
Well, if we have the lease approved, we plan to move pretty quickly, meaning this week, we need to move out. We have logistics in place for that. But if the board did defer the vote, we could work around that too. The big driver of that is the alt-ed location is that program's going to take over the current rec space, and with school starting Monday or Tuesday, that would be where they would start out the year. We have all, again, logistics worked out. That's a temporary location for alt-ed. We plan to find a more permanent location for that also, whether it's internal or external. But that will give us that piece.
As you can tell, there are other dominoes that impact this, not only the temporary alternative ed location, but ultimately we spent quite a few minutes and time here on healthcare costs. The ability to create an employee health clinic, I think, will be a very important strategy moving forward.
Any community comment on this item?
Oh, I have comments, sir.
Mr. Meyer.
I have conceptually the notion of the rec department being in a building physically separate from the school district informs us or reminds us that there are stakeholders in Wauwatosa who are beneficiaries of the rec department who are not associated with the school district, the elderly, for example. So in that sense, it's a good thing. The it is a reality that the relationship between the rec department and the school district has provided synergies that have been a benefit for the school district as well as for the rec department. So then the more that we separate it, maybe the more we lose those synergies. The notion of the 2075 committee not including the rec department in its charter, well, not to comment whether that's good or bad, that's a fact, I'm told. And somehow it makes a difference to me because of the synergies between the rec department and the school district. There's so many synergies, like the SRO program is funded by Fund 80. So there's implications here that I see benefits and I see cautions, not to say there's negatives, but just to say I see cautions that we understand what we're doing. Now, all that said, I'm reluctant at this time to make long-term financial commitments before we know the whole landscape. And I am especially appreciative of the work done by the community advocates who are sitting here tonight who secured this review for us. That's always so helpful to get this kind of, second opinion about things. And that clearly has helped the situation. But I have to say, I don't have appetite right now for long-term commitments anywhere until we know the whole landscape, what our whole strategic plan is and our financial situation after the 2075 committee has finished its work. Even though the rec department is not in their charter, I do think there's relationships there that I'm not comfortable making long-term commitments before I know the whole landscape that we're responsible for. Thank you.
If we didn't approve this lease, it sounds like the rec department would have nowhere to go on Tuesday when we move is that
No,
fair?
we would leave rec department where they are.
Okay.
And we find an alternative location for alt-ed, yes.
Is there a feasible option in your opinion of where to move that though?
Alternative ed program? No.
Right, that's what I'm trying, I see Mr. Meyer's point of not adding any expense, but there's only so much space.
Well, we've already
right?
had the drawings done for the space when the alt-ed was in play for that space. So I think we know the scope and the magnitude. There aren't unknown questions to be answered, and we know what the cost magnitude is within that.
And I would just tee it up for Mr. Pinion because I saw his hand. we already have students who are registered day one for the alternative ed program. There's so many, if we did Venn diagrams, so many of these things cross over with one another. We had so many conversations last year around student behavior. Well, if we want to keep safe schools, we have to make sure that some of the students who we have to provide more support to have places to go. Last year, we didn't have any places for them to go. We now know that we have at least 5 students who have been identified for this need, and it would be tough for them not to have a place. Mr. Pink.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Was there are 5 students right now slated to start. And I would love and been adamant, if we're going to move, please only put our families and students through that once this school year until we have an adequate permanent home. Certainly 5 affords flexibility. However, depending on what the board decides tonight, right, will change how fast we can grow into the school year.
Smart.
So you all kind of get an idea about how I'm likely to vote. But to be fair to the conversation, I have to say that over the years, and I've been in Wauwatosa since 1988, the rec department gets ping-ponged around. It's the afterthought when we do space allocation. So we'll have them over in the Fisher Building for a while, and then we'll put them over in West for a while. Then we'll bring them back over to Fisher Building for a while. And if I was a member of the community, not directly involved on an ongoing basis, yeah, I might not know where the rec department is because I could drive there and it's not there anymore. So that's something to think about. It doesn't truly have a home because it's been kind of and I can't think of the phrasing for it. It's been kind of the tail on the dog in our bigger operation as far as where it resides, and the community, maybe that's not so fair for people in the community. Okay, thank you.
That's why we thought that this was an ideal solution. It doesn't infringe on other school space where we have educational needs, and that it was a very accessible on a bus line for community members to access the place where the entire community, not just individuals who have children in the Wauwatosa schools, anyone who lives in Wauwatosa can access this office space. So that was the reason why we felt that this was a really prudent recommendation to bring to you.
I would emphasize that I like the idea that instead of needing to navigate either to the front of West and then to the back of West and even figure out where it is, even as a West parent, I've never visited the recreation department and our family uses it. And I think that we could say, well, nobody visits it, but wouldn't necessarily be the case if it was out and visible. And I think this sends I think it's a good investment in the community as a whole, for our district to have a visible space and a more accessible, in all different sorts of ways, that were just listed. I want to say thank you for also getting that extra negotiation, in a short time period. I think it does build the confidence of people to invest this way.
I really want to tell a joke about pickleball right now, but I'm not going to.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris.
Random question. In that space with the public, outside of the recreation employees, do we have a number around about population of how much the district uses the actual space? We talked about some of the seniors and other community members. Are we talking 100? Are we talking several hundred? Are we talking about? I wonder if we do have a space and we do this, and that increases, is it a large enough space if more people know where it's out and become utilizing it more?
Yeah, the space is really just for their business operations and it would be open to the public, but with everything being online, the registration guides and the way payments are taken. Matthew's here if he wants to speak to it too. But they don't have, I would say, a flow of people coming in to their site. It's more for employees that work in their office, supporting their operations that this provides.
But it does give more visibility.
Maybe we should bring Matthew up. I guess, Mr. Morris, I think what I'm hearing, if I may paraphrase your question, how often, what's the highest volume of customers you have in your office? And welcome, Mr. Vanderkamp.
With technology now, a lot of it is done electronically, communication, also registration. But currently right now, when you would walk into that space, you would be standing in front of the front desk to register. This would have an opportunity of much more customer facing. There would be a common space to where there'd be a lobby. So folks would like to sit down, would meet. Maybe there's multiple registrations within a house, multiple households. They can all sit there and go through the guide on their tablets, or we do have printed ones that are there, even though we have gone digital. That would bring an opportunity that we currently do not have. But industry wise, that's something that we are very lacking in our recreation department for the community.
And so at the height, how many residents do you have in your office when you're the busiest?
Like in a single day, yeah, we could have 3 or 4 or 5 people coming in. But currently right now, the way we are structured, you walk in, you see the whole recreation team because they're all in little areas, all visible, which is outstanding because collaboration is instantaneous
And necessary.
But we are very much on top of each other, which doesn't always give the right impression to the community personally when you would walk into that space.
Any final board questions or comments? Any comments on this item in the room?
I thought I was tall, but okay, Deb Falk-Palak. Couple of things. I really feel that we're a few days away from being able to make the decision on this. Why is that? Because we don't know the cost. Let us not forget that you are bound by federal law under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, along with Title I. And so this issue actually was brought up for a second or third time on Friday, the 25th. I sent an email to the entire board and Dr. Means, and I got a response on August the 14th because I was concerned about some things I saw in the lease agreement, and just driving by the space, I immediately saw from the outside some ADA issues. So, the PRA review, I had asked for on August 14th, what did the findings show of the internal accessibility review? Has the board gotten that also? Can the community receive that? We as the disability advocates would love to see that review. In terms of costs, I don't think you know the costs, what you're putting into this. You can add up that it's just shy of $183,000 for the lease agreement. We're responsible for 50% of the taxes each year. So what is that amount? Dr. Means had said that the district will use our tax dollars to put in a motorized door. What's the cost of that? Who's going to be maintaining that and paying for it? I heard tonight and something sent out to the community that there will be a 50-50 share in a verbal agreement on ADA updates. We don't even know what the cost of that is. And that really, in my mind, should not be a verbal agreement. This should be a written agreement. The scope of what needs to be done, if you had a chance to read the site review from the outside, is going to take tearing up part of a parking lot, regrading, because it does not meet ADA standards. And so we have to, if you're not aware, the Code of Federal Regulations puts responsibilities on public entities. We're a public entity. We're leasing space as well. So there are a number of issues here that we just don't know the dollars yet. And I believe before you can make a responsible decision that you need to know how much is all of this going to cost. It's going to take a few more days. And really look at your risk tolerance for ADA complaints, and I'd like to know when these issues will be addressed too. So that's what I'd like to say, and I would encourage you. I think we just need a few more days to understand what the financial implication is here before we can move forward. Thank you.
If I may, I have a follow-up question. if there's available time.
Let me continue on
Okay.
with public comment and then I'll come back to the board. If there is more, yes.
Hello, this is Julie Alexander, 7224 West State Street, Unit 1A, Wauwatosa. I'm a property owner, person with disability, and I also work at Independence First. And y'all heard from me this morning. Basically, as a property owner who's been here for a while, I'm really concerned about the amount and the cost of things, because they keep on going up, and I see what I've heard, I looked at the report, I've looked at everything. I see a lot of cost and I'm not quite sure about the return. I know you said it's a good bang for the buck, but as a property tax owner, I've been at all these school board meetings for a number of years. You're always talking about referendums. You're always been talking about health insurance for a good portion of this meeting already. I mean, there's a lot of costs and there's a lot of balances here. I just don't see that the property owner that I really would like to have things nailed down a whole lot more. In terms of the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's a federal law. Basically, the parking lot actually needs some major redo, and that's going to cost a lot of money. That'd be nice to know how much that's going to cost as well, for it to be ADA accessible from the outside. Don't know anything about the inside. So I'm concerned about that as well. I really would like to have things more nailed down before we jump into something that may be a really elephant in the room in a couple of years, or maybe in 6 months or whatever, as we're dealing with some major costs. $183,000 is a lot of money, plus the motorized door opener, which is not something that is actually mandatory under the ADA. And basically, you also have the cost of taxes and everything like that. It just keeps on adding up. Basically, the ADA also has a complaint process. And I would hate for the district to have to deal with another complaint or suit. Thank you.
Oh. Joe McClue, 772 North 116th Street. I agree wholeheartedly with the comments that were previously made by the last two speakers. I did stop by that building on the way to this meeting, and there are a lot of concerns in relationship to that building. I'll note that when I was there, that there's some construction work going on. I certainly hope we have not agreed there in written or verbally to proceed with that lease prior to authorization. I know we've had issues before with things like that, but there are a lot of accessibility issues when it comes to persons with disabilities. There are a lot of financial concerns. I mean, we're looking at a deficit of $7.2 million, and we're now outlying $180-some thousand plus other costs and upgrades and stuff like that for the next 5 years. I find it very hard to believe that, and the previous referendum where we built 2 brand new buildings and remodel or others, that we have no space in any of the multiple buildings that this district owns, where the rec department can't be housed on a more permanent basis, especially given the fact that this is not an area where we real high volume of outside public traffic. It's more for their own operations and storage and stuff like that, as we have mentioned. The costs associated with this are extraordinarily high. If we're just using a small amount of space for that, and we look at $183,000 as an annual rent for that given space, we need to be more financially responsible with what we do And I don't see this as being financially responsible, and I don't feel it's necessarily appropriate. I think, the rec department is an integral part of the school district. And as such, we should remain connected and put a unified front to the general public. Thank you.
Jamie, is there any comment online?
No, there are no hands raised.
We'll close public comment on this. I'm gonna go to Mr. Meyer and Mr. Morris.
Question, please, Mr. Brightman. It just came to my mind during the meeting. Are there any implications for allocation of charges? For example, if the rec department is in a school district building and we have a cleaning service, I always just assumed the cleaning service would clean the rec department as well, and it's all part of our main contract. But if the rec department is in a separate building, we get our DPI audits or whatever, allocation of charges, and is it okay for, maybe you thought through all this. I'm sure you've thought through all kinds of stuff, but I don't know. Can we send the cleaning people over there on a daily basis, and then there's a charge back to, you know what I'm saying? Who pays for that stuff that it was just so easy to share resources because we were physically in the rec department of schools and physically in the same building. Now they're not. If the rec department was run by the city and was in that same proposed site, well, we couldn't just send the school district cleaning service over to help out the city. Well, I suppose we could on a one-off basis in an emergency, but you know what I'm saying? How does that work with chargebacks and allocations and things like that for the day-to-day operating things, repairs, or even IT, or what? How does that work?
Yeah, we would service the rec department just like we do now. They're really in an isolated space as it is right now with additional cleaning support and things. And so we'd be shifting that over to the new site, almost like a satellite of this building. And so the lead custodian of this building would then take on responsibility for anything that might come up over there. That would be our responsibility and help out there. There might be some additional cleaning equipment type to purchase, vacuums, that kind of thing to put over there, but not a huge heavy lift in that. So I don't see that being a big
So
concern.
yeah, it's just kind of a wonky accounting question that I asked, and I'm sure it'll get figured out. If
Yeah,
there
it's-
is-
that's-
it's not like a big showstopper controversy, but it's something
Right.
that, you know how it is when, accepted accounting practices, there's going to be somebody with a rule or something that you never had to deal with before, because we never did this before.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have in the past, but okay, all right.
I don't see any conflicts with that piece. Just to clarify, the lease rate is $14 a square foot times 3,000 square feet, which is $42,000 a year. In rents, it's not $180,000 a year. So just wanted to clarify that.
I just have a random question, just thinking outside the box here. To Mr. Meyer's point, this sounds like the rec department has been a ping pong ball from where it's located from here to there. Has there ever been any thought or any concepts given with the nature of post-COVID? A lot more stuff is digital, a lot of stuff people are doing kind of more self-service, to looking at a decentralized model. Obviously we don't want to decentralize employees and put them remote in every situation, but if they're able to have permanent housing in certain places in the school district and in the existing buildings, but maybe giving that self-service nature of like the DNR, when DNR closed, I think 4 or 5 offices here in Wisconsin, they went to the self-service kiosk. Is there an option to have an electronic self-service kiosk or 10 of them placed throughout the district? At maybe at a less cost than a 5-year lease?
Probably have Matthew talk more to that, but I know the appeal of the space is it provides his team with adequate space and collaboration venues within the space. I think part of what some of those companies and divisions of the state are lacking is that kind of personal touch that they have to stay innovative and stay in contact with each other. So I think Matthew, it's important for the team to have that.
I think Mr. Morris, the one thing, and Mr. Vanderkamp is a better expert at this than I am, but with the recreation department, one stakeholder group that we serve the most, and Mr. Meyer knows this, is our seniors in the community. They actually want a space to come to. And so when you listen to what Mr. Vanderkamp said earlier, the current space doesn't allow for people to come and get a hard copy of the program book. It doesn't give them the ability to sit down with Matthew to say, we want to host a pickleball tournament next spring, or we want to sponsor a senior trip. That type of collaboration is not even available in the current space. And I think the other thing that we can't lose sight of, and this is the reason why we're saying it's a financial benefit to the district. By utilizing this space for the rec department, we're able to use Fund 80. If we would have used the same space for an alternative ed program or something else, we would use Fund 10
for the clinic or
and for our healthcare clinic. Those costs would have actually, again, Fund 10 takes money away from students and classroom resources. So actually, on all fronts, this is a much better financial situation. The last thing, because it went said at the microphone, and I am so thankful to Mr. Brightman and his hard work. We don't have a verbal agreement with the owner. We actually have an addendum to the contract in writing from our attorney that was vetted, and we have it. So we again, I want to thank Ms. Harmer-Rowland and Dr. Worley. We were all sat there receiving a lot of new information as of noon on Friday, August 25th. By this Monday morning, we had a signed addendum to the contract in hand. So we really think that this is a prudent and financially wise step.
If I might just build on something you just said, Dr. Means, I think that we also can't look the other way on other costs. If the students who need that other space and are better served are actually back in classrooms and need more staff with them, then we still have additional costs. And there's many ways in which this plan, we don't know how, we can't really predict how much the rec department might be positively influenced by being more visible, by being, I don't know if they can put out a bigger sign or, inform the community more. But I also think that it would be difficult to say that there's no costs to leaving things where they are right now, because there are definitely costs to leaving things the way they are right now.
It's a great point.
Yeah, another benefit of this property, you mentioned the sign, is you go down the street, Midland Health currently on the sign. That'll be replaced by the rec department's logo, and the other side of the sign has an LED readout where we can put out little messages to the community about it's time to register and that kind of thing. So that's already kind of built into the structures and other benefits, just for the visibility side of it.
I think we're at the point that I'm going to ask to call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoy,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Hammer-Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
No.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes, that item does pass. Next up is board governance. This is the item that we discussed early on in the meeting. Everybody needs an extra handout of what we are going to kind of do as a first reading versus we have all of that. Versus a second reading. Do we want to pause and take a couple minutes?
Yes, please. I was going to ask you.
Let's take a 5-minute recess. You all can kind of confer, and then we'll.
I need another.
Read them. Understand. Jamie, we'll be taking a few minutes. We'll be back a little bit after 8.
Roger.
And then there was one link there.
Yeah, but yeah, Owen, please.
Like if you just.
Jamie, Miss Flower is very
Like, so many.
resilient.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Dr. Means got a question for you.
We are live. We are live right now.
Jamie, if you want to display the policy, so anyone who's watching the meeting
So I'd like.
online can see the policy. Is there a way for you to
And there's no
play and scroll through one of them remotely?
That's from here down.
Corey, with everyone else talking, it's difficult to understand what Dr. Means is asking.
No, I'll try it again. So Jamie, what we're trying to accomplish is showing the policies online while we're discussing each one of them. But I can't sit here and scroll through each policy. Is there a way for either you to do it remotely or to have someone else do it?
Oh yeah, totally. I can do it. Yeah. If you just give me the policy numbers as we proceed, I can share my screen.
We're going in order. We're gonna start with 0144.1 compensation.
Okay. And that's the publicly posted policy, not drafts or anything like that.
It's called copy of compensation. That's the title.
It makes sense.
So Eric,
Whatever is easier for Jamie to scroll. I just whatever is going to be easier for him to scroll.
Dr. Means, would you mind repeating that number, please?
You said it again, Jamie, kind of silent.
Would you mind repeating the number, the policy number?
How many numbers is
0144.1.
I see that. We had a nice. We're doing with his late eighties when we first opened house.
They said needed zero.
Yeah.
These were like compensation one, and so they were like, oh, that was yours. Like, I don't remember.
and
So they must not have modified it after we did what we did.
So it says slash training, which is.
Yeah, I think we did that.
If you want to be a homogeneous set again, otherwise it loses the.
But there's no difference because it's. So like, you know, and then now it's their needs to the old policy or something. Yeah.
So you get rid of other stuff and pull it out, so it doesn't take it over. But the New England athlete is big and large. Okay. If you ever want to stop by sometime, I can show you stuff.
It's the reason I don't go to Stein or anything like that. Like, I should go to somebody's yard and say, I like this.
Yeah, I can show you what's worked for me and what hasn't, and when it's blooms and when it doesn't. I've got like 3 dozen different kinds of different plants. Generally, by native plants, they're killers. It's a war out there. Who survives and who's not. Right. They try to take over each other's space. It's not like these pristine gardens where people plant and they put the anti-germination stuff there. It's all native plants. It's a life and death. One versus another.
There's a reason I just pick the hospice because I'm like, I know what they're going to do.
Yeah, they're cool. But these I've been able to isolate. Breathe, more easy to make. Yeah. So like that. Yeah.
So we're gonna get a 1, 2, 3, and then we're gonna have. I'm not at all. I've been going to games for a decade. I'm not.
So the ones would be.
I'm really separate. So I'm really separate. Everything that's marked, no change recommendations, present that as.
Second.
Thanks. What?
It's the fourth thing.
Yes, you want to
I'm
take
working pretty much.
4 questions and public comment on each of one.
September 24th.
This is like 4 weeks of.
While we're.
It's all 3 weeks of me working.
Okay.
60-70 hour week.
Will he know how to?
My office runs following.
So we won't be going in order of what they have on the agenda.
Trust me when I also have one. That's not.
So, well, I was gonna say, it might end up being on this.
Like middle school.
So I'm doing that and then I'm going back.
Yeah.
I actually.
No, Wednesday, right?
That's for us Wednesday.
Oh,
We're
okay.
second and Thursday.
Like, oh my God, I had that wrong.
I actually said to Jody, can we go to the East football game? She's like, you clearly did not look at our family calendar before you asked the question.
We are actually live right now.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks to everybody who was listening to my calendar questions. And very excited about the East and West football teams. Dr. Means, are you coming back or are you just?
He's over there with the staff.
I know.
Snacks.
Thanks, Dr. Means, for joining us.
Sure.
We appreciate you. My pleasure. Thank you for everybody. Our item that we are returning to on the agenda is under 6 board governance. Dr. Hoig is going to read out a variety of items being updated. Dr. Worley and Mr. Morris are going to take us through a couple of layers, and I'll explain this and then have Dr. Hoig read out. So some of these will be action items that have a level of urgency. So we will take them up and consider them for action on first reading. We also have several items that are coming forward to the board that it is the first reading and there's no recommended changes. If a board member would choose to recommend a change, we would then choose to not pass that this evening. We would choose to send it back, to go back. The motion would be to send it back to committee for the policy committee to consider that change and bring it back on second reading to the board. Then there's a third set of policies that we will take up so we'll do those 2 things and then we'll take action, whatever action the board may choose. The third cluster of policies will be a first reading. We'll take board comment and questions. No public comment on that third cluster. First reading, policy committee will then agenda it at our next, or if it's not now ready, at a soon to be future meeting. And it'll come back for a second reading and board action. We'll take public comment on those before any action is taken. Is that okay? And so I hand it off to Dr. Hoig, who is going to read the motion.
All right.
Dr. Means, I do need to interrupt. Those bylaws are not on board docs, so I'm not able to share them now, but it appears they're proposed. So that's probably why they're not posted at the moment.
You suggesting it's not on board docs, Jamie Price?
What Dr. Hoig is about to review, like bylaw 144.1, 144.5. I believe because they're new, they're not there, so I cannot share them on the screen.
I think it is on board docs, Mr. Price.
I think it should be on the agenda on board docs, and then all the bylaws are attached to the agenda.
Is there?
Oh, okay. I was actually looking properly for the posted ones. So, okay, I'll find them.
Troubleshooting's great.
The challenge is we won't take them in the order they're there, but we'll read the numbers and give.
I thought Eric did. Yeah, that was the 3 different levels. That's really a lot of good clarity. That was you.
It takes a village. I thought it was a collaborative.
I will share my screen. Please just mention the bylaw number before I bring it up.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and read the motion. It is recommended that the school board approve or complete first read for new policies and bylaws. Bylaw 0144.1 compensation. Bylaw 0144.5 board member behavior and code of conduct. Bylaw 0145 board member anti-harassment. Bylaw 0151.1 annual board reorganization meeting. Bylaw 0151.2 required student authority. Oh, nope, I think I missed a line. Required student academic standards agenda item. Bylaw 0152 officers, bylaw 0155 committees, bylaw 0161 parliamentary authority, bylaw 0162 quorum, bylaw 0163 presiding officer, bylaw 0164.1 regular meetings, bylaw 0164.2 special meetings, bylaw 0165.1 notice of meetings, bylaw 0165.2 change of regular meetings, bylaw 0165.4 virtual meetings, bylaw 0166 agenda, bylaw 0166.1 consent agenda, bylaw 0167.1 voting, bylaw 0167.2 closed session, bylaw 0167.3 public comment at board meetings, bylaw 0167.5 use of electronic mail, bylaw 0167.6 email public records, bylaw 0167.7 use of personal communication devices, bylaw 0168.1 meeting minutes, bylaw 0171.1 president, bylaw 0171.2 vice president, bylaw 0171.3 clerk, bylaw 0171.4 treasurer, bylaw 0171.5 local policy, bylaw 0172 legal counsel, bylaw 0173 independent financial auditor, bylaw 0174.1 annual report, bylaw 0174.2 school performance report, bylaw 0174.3 other reports, bylaw 0175 association memberships, bylaw 0175.1 school board conferences, conventions, and workshops, policy 3430 leaves of absence, policy 5120 assignment within district, policy 5200 attendance. And I so move.
Well done, Dr. White. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. To reset this quickly, the school board began undertaking last year under the leadership of Ms. Willis and Dr. Hoig, review of all of our policies. Dr. Worley and Mr. Morris are working, have taken up the mantle and are working with a resource where we are looking at national models and standards, ensuring our policies are updated to current legal, all legal stuff and so on. So we'll be taking a look at some of this. Some of this is local decisions. Much of it is to ensure we align more broadly. So thank you to both of you for doing this, continuing this important work. I hand it off to each of you.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're going to start with the ones that have been marked by our district leaders as needing action. We're going to start with 0174.2 school performance report, which actually says no change recommended. But we need to decide. This has been rescinded. Dr. Means, did you have a expansion on that?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Worley. Board members, community members, this policy has actually been rescinded by Neola. Neola is an organization that reviews policies and updates policies. I would say that nearly half, if not more than half, of all the school districts in the state of Wisconsin utilizes Neola as a reference. They're based in the Midwest. We have a consultant that works with the board policy committee. His name is Dr. Richard Zimmern, and we're recommending that you strongly consider action on this bylaw this evening by rescinding it from your policy manual because the language is no longer relevant in Wisconsin operations of schools.
And also our document notes that there is an updated policy 2700.01 that is what we should be working with. So, I guess Dr. Jessup Banger will bring this one forward to be rescinded.
Okay. Any board questions on this item? What I'm going to do is for each of the action items, call for board question comment. And then we'll move through all action items, and then I'll call for community comment on the full batch.
Sounds good.
Okay. Move to the second.
Hearing none, we'll move to the second item, which we're going to look at 3430. So it's on the last page of your document. This is leaves of absence. And we, in this one, are basically clarifying language, and it adds particularly who can make this decision. We felt that, and we agreed with the request of the district that not every leave of absence needs to come to the school board. But of course, we want you to consider that. But it does, because of how often we meet, that definitely delays the ability of the school board to be responsive to its staff. And we felt that this is more in line now with what Neil is recommending as well, and the current practice among most school districts.
It's usual and customary for administrative staff to have the ability to approve leaves of absences and not have to bring them before the board.
Any questions or comments from the board on this item? It's 3430 leaves of absence. Let's move to our next policy.
Okay, so the next one in this tier that we're going to do, this is the third and final one of this group of action items, 5200. So it's a attendance item on this last page of your of the Excel file that we have. I want to just point out that there is really only one change in this, and it's one that we think was very proactive for our school district, and that is or do you want to explain it?
I actually want to give the microphone to Mr. Pinion.
If I may, and full disclosure as well, that this policy may come back to at some point in this year when we're looking at the 5,000 series. Our team believes there's other other areas we might change and alter to make this better for our students and better for our families. The urgency right now is really around the first hour tardy policy that is written in here that says a student can be 5 minutes late and it's not documented, not counted as tardy, and we have a very significant first hour tardy attendance issue right now. So it is really enabling that to continue versus setting high expectations that we come to school before the bell starts. So we're asking for that line to be struck.
So what it would say instead is that basically tardy is tardy. It's much more clear. It's easier for the staff. And of course, we know that there are many, Luke has also told us there's many things in place just to deal with this in more proactive ways. And it allows them to count the tardies more effectively, and do the interventions, the supportive interventions, the restorative interventions as well, more quickly. So that's, as a committee, we felt that was a good choice, but we of course have it here for you to comment on.
Sure.
I think that's a good idea. And the reasoning is that, and this scenario has been presented to me over the years. Imagine the surprise in the heart of a parent who works in the morning and goes to work and is believing that their child is arriving at school on time every day. And then after many months, you find out that the school, the guidance counselor, have been writing passes for this golden child, and the parent never knew that their child wasn't getting there on time because staff had been using their discretionary judgment to not book it that they were late. So I think, I agree, late is late. The way to deal with it is root cause and not by not counting it. So I think that helps parents as well to parent their kids to know from us what their child is doing.
Yes, and may I just add one point we hadn't made that came up in our discussion, which is that many of those 5-minute late tardies, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Pinion, are between entering the front door and getting to the classroom. So this is also about the hallways.
Yes, you are absolutely correct. And additionally, it does throw a wrench in our problem-solving structure of SST, student support team meeting, because they aren't accurately identifying who these children are that are consistently 4.5 minutes late every single morning.
As well.
I just have a question about the language. Considering that we don't have bell signals in all our secondary schools, does this put us in a precarious position because of, a family could fight that they weren't late because there was no bell to indicate that class had begun? I just wondered.
Actually, last year at second semester, we required all secondary schools to use a bell system.
Oh, so the middle schools do as well?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Just a process of improvement as well as, yes.
Thank you. And I appreciate the bells.
Yes.
I do have a request. There's a lot of we use a lot of wording in here, and this isn't something that you changed as the policy committee. It was clearly already standing in here, but we use words like, let me see if I can find it. When a student initially becomes a habitual truant, I don't think we should be labeling children.
Not first person.
It's not first person language. It's not person centered language. So there's a few different places where I noticed that in this particular policy, and I'm wondering if we can just make those changes to habitually truant child or child.
So my recommendation, because they'd like the party policy to start with the beginning of the school year, that's why we pressed this one forward, recognizing that it still needs a lot of review. And it isn't completely lined up with all what other districts do and what Neola recommends, but we had a request that we fix that one piece. As Mr. Pinion has said, I think that we expect it to come back.
Yes.
And that may sound inefficient, but when you think about what they need in the schools to start the year off, that's really why this ask came forward in this way.
If I may, you're just scratching the surface, Dr. Hoeg, of areas we would look. We just truly didn't have capacity when this was brought to our attention, and to wrap around it the way we need to with the different stakeholder groups that need to weigh in on revisions to this more properly. But we have full intention as our divisions moving through the 5,000 series in collaboration with other divisions to go deep into this and write it longer term. But right now, this is the urgent matter.
Will that come back to us, do you think, this year?
That's the plan, yes.
5,000 is on the list for this year.
So on the question of using the term habitual truant, as I'm seeing now in my quick Google look, Mr. Pinion, I'm sure, could provide expertise on this. There is a legal definition for it.
Correct, in Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin. So if we are using it in our policies, we should use it in the context of that legal definition and not just use it without consideration. Now,
I appreciate you all weighing in.
Right, I agree. That's what they're for. Now, if habitual truancy has a legal definition and the student rings up that definition, well, that's just a fact. But the question then is, who decides that it's been rung up and not, or, how is it declared? Can it be appealed? So if we're going to use that term, to your point, I'm trying to say, we need to use it as it was legally intended to be used and use it properly.
I would agree, and I would say this is one of the reasons why we want more time to do our due diligence with this policy. A, to see where Neola updates have been since 2016 when this was last revised, and B, to align it with all the attendance work that's been going on with our committee this last year and beyond.
One thing I'd add for just context for everybody else, where we've gotten these updates to literally today, we did, and this is future work in there. Neola, while we were in this process, had statewide updates to all their stuff that we haven't even gotten to and that we're not going to get to, that occurred about 3 weeks ago.
We know that process.
So so as you're thinking about that, Mr. Pinion, on some of those things, there may be some of that stuff that we just don't, we're not aware of yet, but those are good things to consider as well.
I would just point out to the board that we are in a point where we can change that language tonight, even as much as it bothers us, like here. Because it would need a first reading. I mean, we wouldn't have to, but we could, but there's a lot else to work through. And I would just recommend that, I hope that it won't hold up what our people and family services needs to do. And I would say absolutely there's a lot in here and there will be a very robust discussion of several of our policies coming up, I think, given what we have. The language is very outdated in so many spaces.
Dr. Worley, I found it interesting last year when we were having some of our learning opportunities as a school system. I received emails and calls from community members who would say, well, have you told the students that they can't do certain things? What we're requesting of the board this evening is to give us the ability to give our secondary principals to stand in front of our students to say, you cannot be tardy. It's in policy, it's our expectation. Let's move forward. I met with one of our high school principals today who said he is scheduling class meetings with each of the classes at the high school to convey not only this policy, if it's approved this evening, but other aspects of the work that we want done in our high schools. So that's why this is one of the 3 policies we're recommending on the board act on this evening. Understanding that I think Dr. Hoyg and Ms. Willis highlighted this. Each of our leaders at the district level will be bringing you updates on different series of policies. So apparently, I mean, and evidently, Mr. Pinion will bring the 5,000 series. Ms. Zolozowski will bring the 3,000 series. Dr. Marble will bring the 2,000 series and so on. We have a schedule that will continue to bring these things. We really want to address the bylaws. We didn't touch on this, Dr. Worley and Mr. Morris. We want to bring the bylaws before you as quickly as possible because it's handily is carryover work from when Dr. Hoyg and Ms. Willis were on the committee. It's time for us to wrap the bylaws up. But I think there's going to be lively discussion on some of the recommendations this evening. So we want to give it its due time, but we do know that we need to bring this to a close.
So we have 3 items that we are bringing, that the policy committee is bringing forward for action. 3430, which is leaves of absence, 5200 attendance, and 0174.2 school performance report. The first 2 have some updates in language. The third is rescinding that as a board policy. So I wanted to pause and just do a quick recap. We are now going to move forward with all the policies that we're possibly taking action on unless a board member wants them sent back to the policy committee. These are all policies that no change is being recommended. Is that correct?
Right, group number 4.
So it was just, we're basically ratifying what currently is. So let's roll through those. After that, these are all the items we would take action on. There'll be an opportunity for board comment as we move through each. Then I will open up for public comment on this item, on the whole package of items that we're taking action on, if anybody has any. And then we would return to first reading for board comment. No public comment on those because there's no action taken. That would be taken when they show up for an action item at a future meeting. Okay. Dr. Worley.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the smallest number again. And you will note under notes, there are several that say no change recommended. And those are the ones that we're now going to look at, but we're not going to read them to you. But you're welcome. We'll give enough pause that if you want to open it up, you can. So the first one is 0151.1. Annual board reorganization meeting has been reviewed and would stay the same. Please stop me if there are any questions as I go forward, okay? 0151.2 required student academic standards agenda item would be still no change recommended. It would stay the same. 0161 parliamentary authority, no change recommended. I pace myself because Jamie's doing an amazing job of getting them up on the screen too. Thank you, Jamie. Then we'll go to 0163 presiding officer. No change recommended.
Yeah, I would have a comment about that.
Okay, so we should pull that one.
Well, no, please
Okay.
hear the comment first. It specifies order of who chairs the meeting, president and vice president, and if they're absent, then figure it out. Not so relevant. I can't remember a time when we haven't had the president or the vice president. When it was assumed that the treasurer was third in line, I was maybe 8 years as treasurer. I never chaired a meeting. So it's kind of irrelevant. But that said, why not just tell us? Why not just say president, vice president, treasurer, or, just lay it out. And if the president and vice president aren't here, instead of having everybody look around and try to figure it out, if you don't have one of those four, you're not going to have a quorum anyway. So why not just spell it out? That's just it's not a big deal. Not a big deal.
Mr. Meyer,
yeah.
could I ask for you to make a friendly amendment?
Okay, a friendly amendment to change it to in sequence, president, vice president, treasurer, clerk. It could be the other way. It could be clerk, treasurer, whatever the friendlier part about it is.
I like treasurer, clerk in that order because that's the reverse order in which we are elected.
Okay, just so
It makes a lot of sense.
let's just put the
Just
clarity
to
there.
clarify, it would go back to committee.
Well,
Because there is a Wisconsin,
Oh.
also then there is a Wisconsin statute this is attached to, so we'd have to go back and just check.
okay.
Yeah, so I just want to make, I'm not against what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just want us to know, and it's okay, we can take it back to committee.
It's hardly worth the overhead because it never happens.
I think what I just want to, for those of you who aren't looking at it, the language instead, what is in there is if neither person, after president, vice president, neither person is available, any member shall be designated by a plurality of those present to preside. So theoretically, the plurality could look around and say, well, who else is an officer? Let's go with them next. So we're not kept from that as our practice, which is different from our policy.
I understood. I just like clarity,
Yeah.
specificity, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's not
No, I-
anything worth the time. I send it back to committee as far as I'm concerned.
If we're accepting it as is.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now, thank you. So now we're going to move to turn your page over, flip it. 0164.1 regular meetings. No change recommended. 0164.2 special meetings. No change recommended. 0165.1 notice of meetings. No change recommended. 0165.2 no change of regular meetings, no change recommended. The next one we skipped down to 0166 agenda. Oh, sorry, no, that was not that one, sorry. Okay, we're skipping to 0167. Sorry, Jamie. 0167.1, voting. No change recommended. Zero one six 7.2, closed session. No change is recommended. Now we're going to skip to 0167.5, use of electronic mail. No change is recommended. Now we're going to go to the
Can I
next.
pause for 1 second?
Yes.
I know that there may be an amendment. I don't remember what that one is. It's on something else we haven't read. Is it, maybe board member?
Yes, I think the policy, yeah. board member
Yes.
actions.
But there was one where there was a proposal made to include that the full board must be CC'd on an email. That would then change, in order to align those policies, we would have to add that same language to this policy.
That's true. There's a cross reference.
There's a cross reference.
Right, so we do need to just hold on that one.
Are we talking about the friendly amendment now, or we save that for later?
Well,
I think that that's a bigger conversation, so I would suggest we pull that.
I think
And
so
look
too.
at,
Thank you,
and move
Jenny.
that to first reading for this evening.
So we're gonna
Hold on any
say,
additional comment, we'll come back to it after we take out the action items, if that's okay.
right, thank you, Jenny. That one should be various
That was
issues to discuss. We'll change that category.
7.5.
Yes, use of electronic mail. Okay, so 01, oh no, so we go now to the next page. So you're gonna wanna go to page 3, which starts with 0167.7, use of personal communication devices. Zero one seven 1.1, president. No change recommended. 0171.2, vice president. No change recommended. 0171.3, clerk. No change recommended. 0171.4, treasurer. No change recommended. 0171.5, secretary. No change recommended. 0172, legal counsel. No change recommended. Yes,
I would like that discussed.
okay, so we'll move that one to change it to various issues category. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. 0173, independent financial auditor. No change recommended. 0174.1, annual report. No change recommended. Now we're going to skip one and go to 0, because we already have read the 174, talked about that. So 0174.3, other reports. No change recommended. And our last page. We don't have anything on the last page. So those are all the group of no change recommended. So I'll pass it back to Dr. Jessup Anger. Thank you.
So there's 2 items that we have removed from the list where there's no changes recommended, where we would like to propose, discuss, consider changes. Those will be moved off of this group. That was email, and legal counsel.
Mhm.
So minus those, these are moving forward for action as proposed by the policy committee. Any other final board opportunity for question and comments? If not, I will go to public comment on these to see if there's anything. If there's not, I'll come back one more time to the board. And then if not, what we'll do is we'll do a voice vote. We'll take the roll on it, and then we'll come back for the first read and just have board comment. Is there any public comment on taking action on any of these as discussed updates to board policy?
I'm a little confused with all of the changes just decided tonight, but is 0165.1 and 0.2 something we can comment on?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so these are the changes that I suggested, and I sent this to all of you, and thank you to those who actually reached out. With 0.1, that would be 0165.1. The last sentence says the notice shall also contain information for access to the meeting for community members with disabilities. And I'm wondering if we can make that more broad. Who's defined by the community? Is it just, the Wauwatosa people? Who is it? Can it be persons with disabilities instead? And the current statement is just addressing access, but there's no statement in here about having on meeting notices how to request accommodations, the accommodation request process. And this is something certainly during the Independence First listening sessions that came out that we're missing this. For example, let's say somebody needs material in Braille or any kind of alternate format, or they need some type of accessibility or accommodation. What's the process? So to have that on the meeting notice is necessary. So that was something that actually when Luke's team presented that report back in last fall, that this was something that was told it would be done by December of last year to have an accommodation request process. So that's what I'm suggesting is that on the meeting notices, it says call or email whoever is going to take accommodation requests. I'm hoping that makes sense. I see some people nodding. And I would suggest the same line item for 0.2, 0165.2. So thank you.
Dr. Jessup Anger, board members, community members. I'm pleased to announce that the district met with 2 representatives from Independent First just last week, where Independence First offered us boilerplate language to address what the community member just spoke of at the microphone. We've passed on our draft language to our legal counsel. Our legal counsel is reviewing that language right now. We hope to have that in place. So all the different things that were just shared with the community will be available in terms of not only how do you access and get things in Braille or whatever accommodation you need to have, and I want to just state this, not just at school board meetings, but if there's a parent who wants to see their child perform in a play, if there's a parent who wants to come to teacher-parent conferences and need larger print, we are very, very happy that we are able to collaborate in a positive fashion with our community to make this happen. It's in process. I'm really proud of the work that we're doing in this space.
Any additional public comment, Jamie, online?
Yeah, we do have one hand raised. Heather Burke, you have the microphone. Please state your name and address.
Hi, it's Heather Burke. I am also a little lost and confused. Are we taking comment on attendance and tardiness?
Yes.
Okay, so my only comment is I'm sure anybody who has met with me knows that I'm habitually early for every meeting. However, the traffic situations around, especially our secondary schools, are always an issue. I last year have been sideswiped twice in front of Longfellow, always hit and runs. So I am not parking idling illegally anymore. So I would just like, I know that's not the situation you're trying to address with this, but I would just like an answer eventually to what I am supposed to do in those situations. I cannot be on my phone while I'm driving. I need to get to work. I can't take time out of my day to call my kid out or explain why he was 2 minutes late. So if we could eventually just come up with some sort of answer to that, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more hands raised.
That's a question. Can I just follow up? Never mind.
We'll come back for.
No, that's fine.
This is Julie Alexander again, 7224 West State Street. I am following up on Deb Falk-Pallet's comment. It would really be nice if, and it would be really nice to see the accommodation policy actually stated on the notices, so that it's actually very clear for the public, for both of those policies, what the accommodation policy actually is. I mean, when we do anything, any flyers where I work, we actually have the accommodation policies just front and forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, may I?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, but now I'm confused. Dr. Means, you described all of the good efforts you're going to honor and consider these requests. But they're not on here now. So after you consider these requests, would you circle back around to us to vote on these policies again? Or what's the most efficient way to hear your input after this process you're going through and then get it into the policy if the board wishes as appropriate?
Legal counsel may come back and share with us that having a separate new policy on how to even identify ADA accommodations may be the most appropriate way to go, because again, we're looking at it from a very narrow perspective of notice of meetings. I reference teacher-parent conferences. I reference if a parent wants to watch their child in a play or in some other situation. So I think what I've learned from this process is that often when schools think about ADA or IDEA, we think about how we're going to accommodate things for students. We don't talk about and we don't think about what does a parent or the grandparent or the uncle of a student need in terms of accommodations. And so, Mr. Meyer, what I would say is that we may have to come back and have a whole new policy just on what does accommodations look like for non-students in a school system and what's the appeal process for it.
Okay. All right. And we're committed to bringing that back to the board.
We had a lengthy hour meeting with Independence First without anyone telling us to do it just last week. I believe we have demonstrated goodwill in this space, and I hope that it is recognized in the community.
Okay, thank you.
And at that point, then we may have to cross-reference, so it would be a small change. But if there's, as I would say, there is also a cross-reference to 0166 in one of these policies. So if we're going to pull, that's the agenda. If we're going to pull the first two to go for more committee decision-making, I think we'd have to pull that one too. I'm just saying, it's another one where there's a similar, it's cross-referenced. So if we change one.
I think if you'd like to pull it, just make.
I'm not saying I want to pull it. I feel like there's no change recommended at this point. We're just affirming where we're at.
Yep.
And we are in the process of making those changes, but we don't know exactly what that would look like. So to be up to date with Neola and have Neola's, or as up to date as we can, have Neola's support for our work, I would suggest that we go ahead, even though it doesn't make the changes that are wanted, because as Dr. Means has pointed out, this could be much more global. It can come back to the committee.
And I think that sounds good. My request to the policy committee is when you've got something updated to come back, if as appropriate, to please do bring it back.
I think we would go ahead and bring that back up Absolutely, not wait another whole cycle,
Yep,
for sure.
Awesome.
I think what I'm really excited about is that even the procedure is happening. It may not be written in policy yet. The procedure is started and it's going to improve with more community input. And then we will get it in all the policies where it belongs.
Outstanding. Any other board comment or questions?
I guess I should say though, is if this prevents someone from supporting the other action items, I'd rather pull it back, if that makes sense.
What I would say is let's call the roll on these updates as presented. Then we'll return to first readings and walk through those one by one as well. Ms. Summers.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Summer Rowland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger,
Yes. And those policies do pass. We will next walk through everything that will be receiving a first reading this evening.
Okay, so we are going to go back now to the lowest number. What I'm going to recommend, may be efficient, it would be for you to go back to your agenda. This may, tell me if I'm wrong, this may be a little bit more efficient than physically reading the whole thing, is that it's highlighted in green, that I read around that and the green part so that you get the context of the changes. Does that make sense? Rather than reading 100% of the document.
Completely fine. I think if any board members want,
We can change that if you want to hear the whole
I
thing.
think that makes sense. That you highlight the recommended changes. And if board members have any other items within that policy that you've got notes on, within that conversation, it would be fine to,
Right.
and we'll pause after each policy just to do the last.
If you want the whole thing read, I'm going to ask Phil to do that.
go.
He's got
I
the
don't-
better voice. so.
I think folks have had it in front of them for quite a while to be able to do
Okay.
it on their own.
Yes, we intentionally pushed as hard as we could to get in front. Okay, so we're to 0144.1 compensation. Again, this is reading. This is not an action item, but we want to get the feedback. So I'm going to mention that the first change is to go from his, her to their duties. Stop me at any point if I read something you want to talk more about. Then to bullet point A, it says expenses will reimburse only for activities authorized by the board. We're suggesting adding participation in the event activity and anticipated expenses must be approved prior to attending using the approval for meeting attendance form. E, when attending a board-approved conference, all fees, parking, mileage, childcare that's been added in. This is again, remembering this is just when people are going to approved events. Meals and housing will be reimbursed. We're taking out E, which did say purchase of printed materials will be reimbursed if purchase approval is given by the board. If such approval is not possible or feasible, a voucher may be submitted. So that would be a proposal to remove that entire clause.
And I'm not against this. Can you share your reasoning?
I wasn't on the committee when this was made, so I could,
This is a crossover policy.
I will turn to Dr. Means and ask him to.
Worked on.
I mean, I think we had conversations about how most things are.
I was thinking it's
digital now.
digital is probably why.
I think that was the conversation around that. I mean, that was the recommendation from Neola. I think it was just an antiquated addendum to that policy, and we decided that the board has access to printed materials or asking Julia to print some off, so it was our understanding that there was no real cost to board members.
But not everything digital is free.
Right.
You know, I pay a lot of money a year for Books Unbound for the state bar. It's digital, and I'm not allowed to, You know, it's still copyrighted. So I don't recall that I've ever used this provision, but I'm just saying I suppose it,
Yeah, I understand everything
you know, yeah.
free that's digital, but I think the platform that we use, the materials that we have are free. I mean, it was a long time ago that we talked about this policy, but that's my recollection.
I have no concerns on my part. I was just curious what the conversation was.
Okay, and again, we're not acting on this tonight, so if you have ideas or suggestions, it can go back to the committee. Then on F, we would be making consistent with the above bullet points, and if a board member attends as a designated representative of the board to a community or school-related event, then we would add to the expenses list childcare will be reimbursed by the board.
Right.
So from an act, you know, we want to get board members. We want people to run for the board, and childcare costs, in my belief, could be prohibitive about somebody running for the board. I'd have two questions though. If I go on a out of town trip for the board, I'm not allowed to take my children with me, but they need childcare while they're home. And so is that kind of a loophole in that? The second thing is, it's really hard when we're cutting healthcare benefits for employees to add compensation for childcare for board members. It's not a good time in our budget history to be adding things. On the other hand, if we want to be inclusive in our opportunities for people to run for the board, I could easily see, you know, I was many years, I was a single widowed parent in the district, and I've always been amazed at the commitment of board members who are parents who have children in the district, you know, all the time away from their children. So, you know, my big concerns would be, is there a loophole where if I go on an out of town trip for the board, childcare get paid 24 hours a day? And the other thing is that I have a hard time adding compensation for the board when we're cutting healthcare for parent employees.
Can I speak to that a little bit? Because if you look at A, any participation in events or activities and anticipated expenses must be pre-approved. So
Okay.
I don't think it would be feasible for someone to say, I want to go on this 5-day conference and then
And you're gonna pay my childcare.
5 days of
Yeah,
childcare, right? It's
okay.
probably not
All right.
likely to be
Good
approved.
point. Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
something that we considered. And childcare was really important to us because it is prohibitive to,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of folks.
Right. Absolutely.
And I would say the same for just general compensation. We're incredibly unique in the state for not compensating board members. Like, I think we're one of
Yep.
2, 5 that don't
Yeah.
reimburse. And it does say in here that you can decline to be compensated for your tenure on the board. So if that's not something that is personally needed by a board member, they may choose to decline that compensation. But I do think that it is prohibitive for many people to be on this board, given the number of meetings that we have, if we don't provide some compensation. And I think our people who are lower resource or single parents are probably not able to run at this point.
What you just referenced isn't new. It's not highlighted in green.
It is new. This is a policy that never existed before.
Okay. Thank you.
And the green changes are the changes that Jenny and I made a policy committee, but it is a new policy.
Okay, that's good to know. We didn't tell that to folks.
What this doesn't test out, and the board would, I believe, to begin any level of compensation, the board would then need to vote to begin that. This allows a pathway to provide compensation to the board. It does not in and of itself provide compensation to the board. Is that Is that accurate?
Nor
What's
does it
the word?
specify a dollar amount.
Right, with the word shall is different, does suggest that there needs to be something, even if it's,
And that was part of
A
our
penny.
discussion. Do we pay the board member per meeting? Do we pay just to cover expenses? Do we pay an annual salary? So it will come up for discussion, but this policy, like I think Dr. Jessup Baker said, is kind of the pathway to have that conversation.
I would love for the policy committee to determine pros and cons of should it be shall or may. I have no stance on this evening if the board should be compensated, but I don't want to bind us to a place that we must be compensated.
I would agree with, may I speak? I would agree with that concern. What if well-intended something becomes like a runaway? We didn't think it would become this kind of thing, without any governance oversight at all. Yeah.
And I think it would behoove us to talk through that, particularly. It's something that we have avoided as a conversation point. There will be no good time to have that conversation. There will always be a reason not to compensate the board, budget, otherwise. So a conversation for another evening, but I would like to give the flexibility within this policy, if adopted, not a determination by this policy.
I've noted. Anything else on this one? There are a couple other there's one other change to H. A voucher detailing the amount and nature of each expense must be submitted to the board business office. To submit to the business office for approval within 10 calendar days after expenses have been incurred. Okay. Yes.
Are we still on 144.1? Or are we
Yes.
moving on? Okay.
If there's nothing else, we can move on.
Well,
But
if you're
there's
moving on, I had a note. I'm noting the time is currently 9:05. And I appreciate the community, both virtually and in person. They've kind of said, we're confused. The way I'm looking at things, it looks like we have about 15 more policies they have to go through. Let me read them off. It's 144.5, 0145, 0152, 0155, 0162, 0165.4, 0166, 0166.1. I think one that's that a lot of community members are interested in is 0167.3, 0167.5, 0167.6, 0168.1, 0175, 0175.1, and 5120. Those are all the ones you still need to discuss. Which you could, did I miss one?
0172.
Oh, that's right. Mr. Meyer put 0172 on. Thank you for that.
I think you might be we could pick a few for tonight because our next meeting is not an action meeting, so we could continue with the.
So my thought to you would be, how do you want to govern yourselves? Do you want to try to go until 9:30? Do you want to it's either you can pick a certain time or you can pick a number of policies you want to try to tackle.
And we can table the others for a future first reading.
So I guess that's your pleasure, but I just thought I would wave the efficiency flag because you still have a closed session to go into tonight.
Exactly.
And I believe with two, I would be comfortable if folks are done now, that we table the remainder.
I think we should cover one because there may be community comment.
We will not be taking any community comment on these this evening.
True. Okay.
But I think
We could read it.
following what Dr. Willie's saying, if maybe have the discussion.
We could have our discussion so people have a better idea of what
So
to.
that the community can get a sense of where we are.
And not have them wait another meeting.
Yep.
Yes,
So we'd like to
that's the 0167
put forward public comment.
because then people can email us.
That's good.
I think that we should have that discussion so people have a better idea.
Trying to channel my inner
That's good leadership.
post coming out of our last retreat of,
Yeah, we need to be we need to follow.
And I have a
Energies.
low hanging fruit comment about 0172. If it's appropriate for you to entertain it now.
We could do that one first.
let's do 0172 and then we'll do public comment and then
Sorry, Jamie.
we'll
So
No,
zero
we're not-
one,
We're just reading first.
We're just reading,
Just
yeah.
first reading, so we're giving comment.
yeah.
And
Then we would vote for those next meeting.
Does a motion need to be made to table the others?
Yes, we'll have to make a motion.
Yes.
But let's go ahead. We didn't say we had to go in order. So let's go ahead and do these two and then we can have someone make a motion to table the ones we didn't read tonight. Go ahead.
Okay, the 172 basically says access to legal counsel is through the board president. And I say that there are considerations there. If I'm a board member and I have a deeply personal matter that I feel might be a conflict of interest creator for me, I would like not to go through the board president and disclose my very private personal thing, whatever that might be. I would like a chance to go directly to council and then council use their good judgment as to whether to refer it back to the board president, for example.
Mr. Meyer, I wonder, does it give you that provision because it says shall normally? I mean.
Well, I don't know because I've tried to access legal counsel directly myself and I have been denied. And that has precipitated an inability to diffuse situations before they got a lot worse. And so, I mean, when I started on the board, members at large like myself, I was not an officer, we could call legal counsel. Nobody thought anything of it. And I had a conflict situation where I called legal counsel and said, hey, do I have a conflict here? And they said, no, you don't. That was it. It was all over. There was no need to involve anybody.
Would it, I'm just thinking about how to make the language as clear as
Yeah.
possible. If we did a board president or superintendent, do you think that you'd have, like, that would open up a channel that had been
Yeah, a
previously closed
channel,
to you?
right. So the board president doesn't become the all
only
controlling
gatekeeper.
crossroads. I've always been comfortable going to the superintendent. And the superintendent might say, oh, I don't want to mediate that. And I don't blame him, right? Right. But the board president, but the superintendent can say, okay, I'm going to give that to council. You can ask that question to them and I'm out of this, you know? Okay, something, it would have to be quick. It
Mhm.
would not be a ongoing representation thing.
Mhm,
Cause then it's not what that is meant for. It's for that threshold question
mhm.
or a threshold. What do you think about this? And the council is very capable of just disposing of the matter very quickly. Now, if the council has to write a legal opinion, that's a different conversation. Right? Different conversation. So maybe you'll say, if a written opinion, I'm thinking through this as I go, if a written opinion needs to be expressed, then it must go through board president. Right?
Legal counsel may articulate.
Right.
This is outside our role as legal counsel for the board.
Yeah, they may do that as well. They may decline to okay, so I'm not dying on this hill tonight. I'm just saying, those are the considerations in my mind about this.
My suggestion to this would maybe to take this to legal counsel. And as a policy committee, ask if there's any model examples, with language in addition to what Neil provides.
That would give a little more leeway for a board member to access legal counsel other than through the board president. That's what we're looking for.
I would be interested if legal counsel would recommend that or not.
Okay. Duly noted.
But I think it's important that you make it clear that there would need to be some boundary, right? that it would need to be something succinct and yes, the legal counsel is comfortable expressing something verbally. But if it's, you would have to write a brief, a legal opinion, the 5-page, that's a lot of time, a lot of money. That's not what I'm talking about here.
So we can ask legal counsel, we can also ask the Neola advisor what is a typical. Yeah.
That's a truth ball.
Yeah.
Okay.
Given
I can
what
give
those
you, I
boundaries are.
can give you an example. My insurance carrier, if my home insurance carrier or my personal insurance carrier for my LLC is the same carrier up for vote to provide coverage for the district, can I vote or not? I don't.
No.
I think that's none of anybody's business who my personal insurance carrier is. I don't think it's the board president's business, not personal, but I just want to be able to ask that question. And know I'm okay or not okay. That's it, that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Okay, that's a good example. Okay. Nothing else on that one. Then I'm going to ask that we do our first reading of one final one for tonight before we set the others aside. And that is 0167.3 public comment at board meetings. Just getting it because I can't read the screen all the way across the room, so. Okay. So just a reminder of context that we have talked about this in an in-service, which could be observed by public. We have also had 2 board members give some deep thought and suggestion, and then the policy committee has also discussed this in an open posted meeting. We're really excited now to be able to talk about this in another public space because we feel like this is really, I think, at the heart of some of the work we do. The other context I will say is that many of these changes, again, have been talked about and researched and thought about based upon peers and also what has been said by community members that have messaged us and shared their ideas, suggestions that have been made. Many of you know this has been a conversation for a while. So I'm going to go through this and I'm going to talk about the green pieces and the context, and we can stop at any point because this is us commenting on it so we can take a few notes as a policy committee and come back. And of course, those who are in the public are welcome to reach out to us, any of the board members after this to comment further. So the title is public comment at board meetings, to change to that because it really gives much more clarity what this is about. Participation carries a different feeling to it. Comment is sometimes comment where we respond. Comment is sometimes comment where we don't respond. And we're not really inviting the ideas in, but we're not inviting the public in quite the same way as participation might suggest. And this is more typical of what other boards as well call this passage. Meeting structure. The board will take public comment during meetings where there are no action items on the agenda, typically the first meeting of the month. The school board will take public comment. Same thing, the board will take public comments on both non-agenda items and agenda items toward the start of the meeting agenda. Persons interested in speaking on the agenda or non-agenda items are required to sign up electronically in accordance with the district's procedures. Persons are required to submit their name, affiliation with the school district, and the topic they would like to discuss. There are several changes here, so let's just open the space for people who want to comment on this. Questions? Yes.
I was curious about why it was the meeting with no action items. I guess the reason I was thinking about that was that would then be, if I'm thinking of like how things are presented, that would mean it would be before the item had even been presented or discussed by the board. So it seems to me like it would make more sense to have us in the first meeting to not have public comment when we're having a meeting where we're discussing things. Let the public make their comment the next meeting before we vote.
So a couple of reasons, and then glad to turn it over to Jess and Liz because this was part of their thinking. But I thought about that too, but I became more understanding of the idea is that a couple of things. When there's public comment at the meeting and that can inform us, there's public comment then, phone calls, electronic. But then if we have only public comment, we have public comment we have it both, but we have public comment at an action item meeting. There's not a lot of time to think about that public comment. So it really, moving it this way more strongly encourages the public comment earlier in our process rather than later. And I don't know if Jess and Liz want to say anything else about that.
No, that matches our thinking.
Yeah.
You know, I think, and thinking about Dr. Boyd's comment, and, you know, we've kind of piecemealed this. I gave you suggestions, but I do wonder are we only going to have, so just to be clear, we're only going to have one opportunity for public comment at the beginning?
That would be my suggestion, is that there be a single time. Well, actually, I might go two, one at the beginning of the meeting and one at the close of the meeting, that there be two opportunities.
So that's what I would suggest, that the community get an opportunity to kind of share their thoughts up front, but then also have an opportunity to process and hear the discussion. And then, you know, give any other additional comment, just because, you know, things are presented that may not, you know, they're presented differently in public than they are by reading a document. And some things might click for some community members, and we might want their input on that. So I do think it's important to have public comment at least at the end of it, after everything's been discussed.
I would also suggest that we limit public comment to 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Now, what I would say is for items that are big, that I think we then look at an open forum or like a non-board meeting opportunity for feedback, similar to what we talked about tonight, that I think the board would do if any boundaries were changed, that we do something that is bigger and just focused on that, so that that's the only work that evening. Second, if the board wanted to extend the 30 minutes, there would be that choice. But that right now, as this is a little bit later, it articulates the chair of the board determines how long it is. I would rather have it spelled out in policy that it's 30 minutes. And then by action of the board, a motion, a second, and a vote, that there could be a choice to extend, because then it's the will of the board to extend it.
And the discretion of the board to extend it, right? It's not a requirement.
Right.
Okay, and it takes the president, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I mean off the hook as far as opening up to complaints about your use of discretion to limit or not limit the time, the duration. Correct. That it makes it very objective. We're 30 minutes. It's hard to do your job from the chair.
I think it's a power sharing.
Yes.
It's the responsibility of the policy and then the full board if there's an extension.
Yes. Now, if I may, while I have the floor, the comment about, do we have public comment at first reading, or do we have public comment on the evening we take the vote? To my perspective, the most valuable public comment is public comment that is decided to be used to craft or assist in crafting of the action item. And that's with Dr. Worley's perspective. I want to hear public comment on first reading to give administration an opportunity to craft inclusion of that concept in a thoughtful way. it's very difficult to on motion on night of the action item to edit or amend in a way that's as thoughtful as it might otherwise have been. So I always want to get that public comment in time for the superintendent if the public comment is wanting to be incorporated in our action item. They have time to wordsmith it so that we don't have any unforeseen gotchas or minimum. That's kind of how I look at it.
We take electric public comment up till I think about noon of the day of the meeting at this point, right? So,
No.
so there is actually, and it does come, it's just not at the meeting.
Now, also somehow I'm not comfortable with the electronic registration that creates a database, a public record. And it's a little too easy for people to request that public record for the names of who commented. I mean, it just kind of, we get targeted, the comment, it's a tough world now with public comment and people who react to it out in the community. So, I mean, I like the idea of the people who comment should in some way be associated with our school community or our Wauwatosa community. But how do you do that without creating this database of people?
And we can't, my understanding is there's not strong legal ground to limit.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Once you've opened that you can speak at a meeting.
Okay.
You can't limit it. You can request an address. You cannot require. You can ask what relationship they have. So are you a community, and a lot of people will do that. Are you a parent? Are you a community member? But you can't limit that. There was a great WSD webinar on that piece. Because I think one of my thoughts and requests would be a consideration of no longer taking public comment unless you're in the room. I would love to be able to provide alternative opportunity. Like I find reading, if someone has emailed or kind of communicated in different ways, to the point where I would love for us to formally put into policy that if you are providing public comment, that becomes part of the packet. So if you submit an email to the public comment, it is all public records requestable now, but that it becomes part. So if you wanted to just be on the record of, I support this, I don't support that, whatever it may be, the board sees it, but the public would also see where do the folks who kind of submit that go? But I worry that and I struggle with this because I want to balance access to comment and to get us information. But I think that can be done via email and other means, but only taking comment in the room. I think when we've opened ourselves up to anyone in the country, and we've had that, calling in, we can't limit that. And I really feel most strongly about the perspectives of people in the Wauwatosa schools, in the Wauwatosa community, taxpayers, community members, and hearing their perspectives.
Well, and technically, it's hard to manage.
It is not easy to manage.
I mean, it really is. I mean, what's their volume? Their enunciation of the words? Can they hear you as chair reply to them to give them a warning? Hey, lower the temperature a little bit on this. I'm worried that I'm going to have to cut you off. They can't see you try to do that if they're remote. They can't see you try to manage the meeting constructively. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I want to go on to a couple others. I did want to ask, kind of bouncing around, would it be possible to just take these three big issues that have been brought up and to see if anybody wants to say anything else on each one of them at a time? Are you okay with that? So the first one was maybe more than three, but adding an end of meeting public comment. Now, many of these ideas that were changed in here did come from some of the research that was done. So, but can we test that? If we were to go back and add an end of meeting public comment, part of our discussion in committee about that, and I don't have a strong connection to taking it off was that, again, in many of these cases, there's such much more public comment in our meetings than is typical. That's not to say that the other folks have it right, but just to be aware of that. And I don't think it hurts us to have it at the end, except a lot of people won't stick around. So so we have gone the balance of don't limit it at the beginning, but only have one. Personally, I'm fine with limiting it and then having more time at the end. If others want to speak to that, I think we should just give our committee some guidance on that so we don't have to come back, multiple times.
So I'd like to make a suggestion. I think it's very specific and clarifies that. So piggybacking off of what Dr. Eric Jessup Banger said, I think that we should have public comment on agenda and non-agenda items for 30 minutes with a limit of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. And then at the end, only take public comment on agenda items. I think it's important to make that clarification so that because the idea is to give people an opportunity to speak about what was just discussed. But again, too, I think that we want to encourage folks to communicate with us in other ways, whether that's calling us, we all have a board phone, or emailing us. And I would like to make that distinction.
And you're saying that would still be on
just the
first meeting? Because the alternative that I was going to propose is that we would allow public comment at the beginning of every meeting. So that we would have 30 minutes max at the beginning of every meeting for public comment, which would,
really just gets.
yeah, as opposed to like having a beginning and an end. So if we're gonna have it twice in a month, let's just do it at the beginning of each meeting twice. At the beginning of each of the meetings.
I think either one. I mean,
I would agree with Jenny on there on that space, because then it's not where it feels like for the quorum that we're holding people hostage, that if we have a long meeting, that they're waiting
like
until 10
tonight.
p.m. to have the
Yeah,
public
that's
comment.
hard. Yeah.
That's what we were thinking, is that it's really hard to hold.
Especially if someone comes in, that has, specific needs, or with their children sitting there waiting until the opportunity, that 30 minutes at the end.
So I'll just say I like that, having the 30 minutes at the beginning of both meetings. And just to reiterate, we did a lot of research on what the neighboring districts did. We looked at over 20 districts that surround us, and none of this is an outlier. Most have one, a few have 2 comment periods in their meetings. 2 to 3 minutes is typical. And almost all, I would say all but maybe 3 require pre-registration before making a comment. So we're kind of the outlier now, trying to get more with what the rest of the districts in our area are doing.
And also to add to that, many districts only have 1 meeting per month, where we in Walton do, which is kind of an outlier as well.
And if we do the 30 minutes, there still is the provision of being able to take a vote to extend that. So,
Right. Yeah. And for really big topics, I think it would really behoove us. And we'll talk at a future meeting about kind of other community engagement initiatives that we've discussed, that we'll nail those down. But I think when we've got big things, Costa East Lights was the first meeting I chaired as board downstairs. I think there's settings and venues and opportunities where if it's just focused on community conversation, and it doesn't need to be in the venue of us sitting at the front of the room. There's other ways to get community conversation and discussion around big topics for us to be informed.
and we look towards the leadership of our school board president to help us figure out. We know you have a lot of ideas, so we're going to be talking about that as a board. Big issue number 2 that people brought up: registration or not registration.
I want to say something quickly. Liz and I mentioned the research that went into this and all the neighboring districts. I also wanted to thank SOS, because they put a ton of work and energy in helping us gather some of this data as we were discussing this last year. So it was a community effort. I mean, it wasn't just, a few individuals who want some change, but, a real big community effort in looking at this. So.
And they resent that to all the board members. So that's awesome. Yes, registration or not.
If we limit it to 30 minutes, if we have each comment be 3 minutes long, if we go to only comment in the room, I'm not in favor of creating a registration database that's a public record for people who come here to speak. And that's just I'm thinking about the people if they get targeted in some way, or now they start getting like email solicitation to sell stuff or so, I don't know.
Right.
That's just my view of that. I'm worried about the people and creating more data out there for people to want to get at.
One thing I'm thinking of, I remember some of our board meetings that were where there was a lot of public comment and there was almost like jostling to get in line.
Yeah.
And people standing in line. I feel like maybe if all those other provisions become part of this policy that you're speaking of, Mr. Meyer, I wonder how you might feel if people I think like you do, if I remember from talking at Common Council, you have to like fill out a piece of paper that just says like, I want to be in line, basically. And so you're virtually in line and then they call you to the front when it's your turn to talk.
Or a number.
Yeah, like you turn it in and then you become first because you got to the meeting
Right, but
first.
you don't have to write your name in the paper. You know, you get like a raffle ticket
Oh, I
thing,
suppose
right?
you could do it.
Like where-
Yeah, deli line.
I suppose the deli line. You could.
And you're number one, and you don't have to tell me who you are, but you're number one, and then you call, just to throw out brainstorming stuff there, right? So that they
Just to
don't.
maintain some order of like who gets to go and
Right,
people don't have to
right. 'Cause I don't
stand on
like-
top
I
of
don't
each
like
other
none of this
and
like that, right,
yeah.
but jostling, or, I was first, or I was first, and I sat down, and now you stood up, and
Right.
anyway, so.
I am supportive of registering in advance. I would love to hear. I would love to hear kind of like the reasoning behind why districts do that. I have my own kind of sense making on this. I would if we do it, where I felt more strongly was not the pre-registration. My understanding from this policy is each speaker would have an opportunity to speak once for 3 minutes in that window, in the 30-minute window of time. But I would like to see more than a single electronic way of doing it, that they might do it that they might sign up in person, they might call and have their name.
Call is included in electronic. I checked that. Oh, your phone is an electronic.
Sneaky. So that was my only thought, but I don't have strong feelings either way about the pre-registration, but I would like the idea of, I would like to hear multiple community voices. And I would like to have emails part of the public record. That to me is, I think, I find that most people are uncomfortable speaking, particularly around big topics, but I would like them to be able to share their view on important issues.
So currently the policy says will be requested to preface their comments by announcement of their name and address. It doesn't say they must in order to speak.
So I think the signing up piece, I mean, this was one of the recommendations that we made. I've seen it done in other districts where it's in person, and I guess that's what I was visualizing, because I don't want to limit comment of folks who might find out about a particular comment or a particular issue that we're discussing, the day before, but then maybe public comment's already full because we have people register via, electronically days before. So to me, it was in person, right? Again, encouraging that in-person opportunity and really lifting up the voices in the room.
And to Mr. Meyer's point, I would say I would be more comfortable too. I think the policy says, share their relationship with the Wauwatosa School District. I think that's better than them giving us their address.
This is group
I'm not
affiliation.
comfortable that people have to give us their address. So if we could just say, are you a parent, student, teacher, or concerned community member, then they're sharing their relationship, but not their personal address.
Yeah, I agree.
I would agree with that as well.
Would be a parent, student, teacher, group affiliation, because again, we can't just limit it to somebody who's
Or
got
just
one of
community
those.
member, I don't know what.
I think that's what we have in there in the meeting structure is required to submit their name and affiliation with the district.
Sure.
Simple as that, because we don't have.
However they feel they're.
So remove address.
Would that make you feel then differently, Mr. Meyer, about the pre-registration if it was just name and affiliation?
It's better. I mean, we're all told by security advisors, don't put your address out there, especially if you're not home. don't put your address out there. So, yeah, here I am. I'm at the microphone. Here's my address, everybody. I'm not home. You know, I mean, I don't want to do that to people. And none of us do, right? I'd like to know people's names, but will it be abused by somebody in a way we don't anticipate? That's my concern. I'm, you know, and so I could go either way. But just please know that is my concern, that somehow we unwittingly allow people to be targeted in some way that is not what we think they should have to go through because they wanted to come and participate with us.
It could be first name. They could choose how much.
Well, I don't know.
details.
I don't, but you know the
Okay.
motivation.
So we'll take that back from our conversation. Last big issue I heard, unless there's something else. Only public comment only in the room. Not
I'm in
taking
favor of
virtual.
that.
I support that as well.
I don't actually, so I think it's an accessibility thing. Not everybody can physically get here and maybe not even physically.
I think that was our
But-
discussion in the committee.
What if my like kids are sick, but I can't get here because I need to stay on with my sick kids or my partner's on vacation or work.
Right. I mean, what if I'm taking care of my kids and
Exactly.
I can call them from.
So I think we have to weigh like the risks and the benefits.
Mhm.
And I do think, again, we have opportunity for our community to call us, to email us. Like, we're not shutting off communication, but we're also not opening up ourselves to having somebody from anywhere in the world attend our meeting and make public comment. Because I thought about it too. I mean, there's a lot of privilege that goes into it. There's a lot of accessibility. People who may not want to come and speak in person, but are more comfortable behind a computer. But I do think, and we've seen it happen to us, that we just open up ourselves to not good. So we have to weigh kind of the risk and benefits and really encourage folks to communicate with us via public comment, via our individual email addresses, or via our phones.
The other committee learning that we had in talking about this was that our Neola advisor said that actually most boards, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, have stepped back from even allowing virtual participation at all.
Right, but I'll add to the point about the people with disabilities. And I've said it from time to time, I am a stutterer and I manage it very well, actually. But there was a time where to come to a microphone like that when I was 17, if I could have done it remotely, maybe I was okay, but it's a whole different level of scary to come to the microphone. So that just came to mind here. It's like, I'd rather it was in person. And then I see, Deb over there, and no, we want Zoom, we want to Zoom. And that made me think about what tricks I would try to do so I could speak in public.
And I don't think I was suggesting we get rid of it. I just wanted to give context of what we learned. I have the same hesitation that I think that there is an accessibility piece. It could be that we could go back and figure out what can we do legally is there a legal basis on which someone could request? Yeah, it gets messy, doesn't it, Eric? Really fast. So it's either all or nothing.
I think that's why I'm in favor of not the virtual options. And we've unfortunately experienced it firsthand in our district, and it put us in a very precarious position. And again, I think getting this culture that we encourage people to reach out to us via other methods.
So looking at the time, is there anything else in this that stand out to you as big pieces? Because we want to make sure that the public who's listening in now has this next couple of weeks. Actually, a policy committee doesn't meet again until the end of September, unless we change that.
I had one underneath D. It's to add request the assistance of security or law enforcement officers.
Okay.
And I don't know what the exact language would be, but if we have a security member at the meetings because of previous threats. So.
And then did we have that note? Were we gonna modify F to include 30 minutes unless extended by vote of the board?
Yes. Now, I have a quick question. a few of these items, particularly, I think, Dr. Means help me out here, B and C, are responsive to the legal case and our commitment to that. So we do need to think about balancing both community input and our input and timeliness of responding to, because there are a lot of different edits that we had to combine here. So just
B, C, and E,
B, C, and E.
or excuse me, not E, but, no.
Yeah,
E,
E too.
it's E.
The idea of someone at the microphone, I believe they are able to comment on individual board member stuff, but it has to be directed to the chair. They can't be trying to elicit a response from the board member. Now that's tricky to manage that distinction, and that puts the chair in a tough spot. I wouldn't want it that it's like a gotcha. The minute somebody comes to the microphone and says Mike Meyer's name, that president can cut him off right away. Boom. Because come on, give them a break. Just remind them that we don't exchange dialogue here. By the same token, we often have to remind citizens that this is not a dialogue, but sometimes the board members as well lapse into it and start responding on our own. So we kind of make our own problem there when we do that. So anyway, just some thoughts.
I think you're right there, Mike, I think that was one of the big pieces there with the changing of the title from public participation to just public comment. So it is one way.
Okay.
It's not, bi-directional.
At this point, I'm going to entertain a motion to table the rest of the policy updates until a future meeting.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
Please call the roll on that.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt,
Yes.
Miss Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Roland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger.
Yes. We are at final public comment on any non-agenda items this evening. Anything in the room?
Hello, I just want to say that, when you're discussing this particular issue here, you always have to think about accommodation issues for persons with disabilities and options for that to happen. Registration is a touchy thing because if it's all electronic, there's a lot of people that don't have access to computers, et cetera, that can do that. So you have to come up with methods so that they can register appropriately. Basically, it's sort of a slippery slide thing. I think the other thing is there are people that, need to have the Zoom in order to actually participate, and you can make comment here. I mean, I think that's might be a accommodation that could be looked at as well. It's a big issue for appropriate inclusion of people with all types of needs.
Thanks, Deb Falk-Pellick. First of all, I just wanted to say if it's possible, just a reminder for board members to speak into your mic because it's hard to hear. And I did ask the gentleman over here from online people were having a hard time hearing. So just a reminder of that. Also, I really liked how not too long ago for policies, we used to write first reading and second reading on the agenda. It made it very clear to the public what's going on. Like today, I don't know what happened. I think it was very, very confusing to me and I think others as well, what happened. So if that process could maybe be cleaned up and put back to first and second reading on things. And I've heard a lot about a concern, it was one person that called in and was doing something that none of us, really, let's not just make rules based on one person and limiting the rest of our community members because of concerns about one person. And that would be really tragic and a shame to limit the voice of the people in our community because of a concern over one. So thank you.
Amy, are there any comments online?
There are no hands raised.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn into closed session.
It is recommended that the school board adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin statute 19.85(1) subsection G to confer with legal counsel for the governing body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted with legal respect to litigation in which it is involved regarding Fox v. Wauwatosa School District Board of Education, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt.
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Roland,
Yes.
Mr. Meyer,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anger.
Yes.
We are live.
Good evening, everyone. It is 10:23 p.m. And the Wauwatosa School Board is returning to open session. We will not be taking any action this evening coming out of our last closed session regarding Fox versus Wauwatosa School Board of Education this evening. I will ask for a motion to return us to a second executive closed session.
It is recommended that the school board adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, para 1, para C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and Wisconsin statute 19.85, para 1, para F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, which, if discussed in public, would likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, specifically to consider an agreement resolving an employee grievance filed by a former district employee and a resignation agreement with a current district employee, and I so move.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Worley. Mr. Morris? Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Roland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anchor is a yes. We will be convening into executive closed session, and we may be returning for another open session later this evening. Hello, the Wauwatosa School Board is back in open session at 11:05 p.m. May I have a motion to accept a agreement with Kenda Roman, current school psychologist, with a resignation effective August 28th, 2023, a payment of $66,500, no objection to unemployment benefits, and a neutral reference letter for a release of all claims.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Roland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anger is a yes. And that motion passes.
May I make a motion to adjourn?
Discussion? No. No discussion.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Roland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anger, and we are adjourned 11:06 p.m. We'll see many of you.
Regular.